This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Welcome to the Easthampton Special City Council meeting for Monday, April 27th, 2026. The meeting tonight is being recorded and broadcast by eMedia on Charter Channel 193 and live streaming on their webpage, easthamptonmedia.org. Councilors and participants in this meeting are gathered hybrid on the order extended until June 30th, 2027, allowing us to do so. I remind both the members of the City Council and the public participating remotely to remain muted until recognized by the City Council President. Also, for the members of the public, please remove your camera for the duration of the meeting unless you are participating in the public speak time or the public hearing. Thank you. This meeting is now called to order. Mary Ann.
J.P. Kwasinski.
Here.
Connie Denham.
Here.
Tamara Smith. Here. Felicia Jadzik.
Here.
Tom Peak.
Here.
Jonathan Schmidt.
Here.
Amanda Newton.
Here.
Kayam Jamrong McQuaid.
Here.
Nathan Markey.
Here.
Great, thank you. Vice President Jadzik?
Thank you, President Denham. I'd like to make a motion to suspend public speak until after the mayor introduces his requests.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to move public speak until after the mayor presents the information about the special election on June 9th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. The first item on the agenda is the supplemental appropriation for $5,000 from free cash to fund new part-time position in the tax collector's office in FY 2026. There was a mix-up here. We moved this item to, we removed this item from the agenda without prejudice. And so what we need to do is there was a, how do I explain? The individual was hired before we had actually appropriated the funds for that. And so now we have to figure out whether or not to proceed with the funding of that position. So what we need to do is we need to set a public hearing, and we're going to have to set that for Monday, May 11th, and we can offer some more information. Actually, if the mayor would like to speak to this and provide a bit more information to the council, that would be helpful. And then if councilors have any questions, we can ask them at that time, but we will need to set a public hearing.
So thank you so much. And I know I spoke about this at the last meeting a little bit, and I just wanted to clarify a little bit. So we are in desperate need of a part-time person in collections because that is where it is the gateway to the funds of the city. And if collections gets behind, that means that the auditor gets behind and the treasurer gets behind. So it's a pretty critical kind of point of pressure. And so we had proposed using $5,000 of free cash, which then would have been backfilled by enterprise funds. The intention is for this position to be fully funded by enterprise because this person is going to be basically taking over water and sewer. And so, you know, there was a mistake that happened in personnel where the position was offered before the funding was in place. And so we're managing that on our end, but if we can, you know, get this position back into the public hearing, it would be helpful in order to be able to secure this person who is really qualified and is going to be a really great addition to that department. So we can keep them and take the pressure off of this pinch point that we've identified that allows us to bring funds into the city to help us keep everything running smoothly.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any questions? Vice President Jadzik.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I 100% am supportive of getting some support for our collection office. I think what I'm a little bit disturbed by, and I'd love to have either you or I think Director Russo is on the call as well, help me and all of us understand how this person came to be hired before we even have gone through this process. And I'm especially a little concerned because when we discussed this last week, Director Russo, neither Director Russo nor yourself mentioned that this person had already been hired at that point. And we had already had a discussion at that point around how this is not just a contract position. This is actually a position that will need to be benefited through providing unemployment benefits if this does not end up going beyond June 30th, or if we don't have further funding for this. So is there further clarification you can provide around this?
Well, so I'll take the last part first. And so since this is going to be a position that's funded by enterprise, it would not be affected by any layoffs because water and sewer enterprise is funded through the water and sewer rates. And so it would not be subject to layoff, which means it wouldn't be at risk for unemployment. As to the other piece, and I can, if our HR director is on the call, I can let her speak to it.
Yes, I can speak to that. So
Hang on just
it was
a second. Hang on a second,
error.
Director Russo, it's the city council president who recognizes individuals, so I just want to acknowledge that. So Director Russo, if you'd like to introduce yourself and state your role for the city.
Yes, Emily Russo, HR director.
Okay,
And
great.
it was a communication error, and we came up with a path forward so this doesn't happen again, where we're going to implement requisition forms that require us to assure that there are funding sources, account numbers, everything in place before a position even gets posted. So this will not happen again.
Okay, great.
May I ask
Did you, Vice President Jezek, a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you, Director Russo, for explaining. I am just a little, again, as I said, concerned because when you spoke to this council last week and we were debating this exact position and this appropriation, let me actually rephrase. When was this person hired is what I'd like to know.
I want to say
Director
they
Russo?
were probably hired about 2 weeks ago.
So then my question is, why did you not mention that this person had already been hired when we were discussing this last week?
I didn't think of it and didn't know that the council didn't know. I apologize. I wasn't intending to speak on this issue last week. That's not what I was here for, so I wasn't prepared for that. I apologize, and so I didn't think to mention that, and that is an error on my part.
Vice President. So I think this is just a note for the mayor, since you're responsible for all of the various departments in the city moving forward. I think given the fact that we are in kind of financially challenging times, I believe, just given the engagement and the activity from council, that they're going to be much more engaged in kind of the process of finances and asking questions and making sure that we have funds available. So just want to make sure that this particular incident or anything similar to that just doesn't happen again, so we can make sure that we're holding everyone accountable, including ourselves.
Absolutely. And I will say that when we did realize that this had happened, we created internal controls to make sure that it didn't happen again.
Great, thank you. And you and I did communicate, and so that was a helpful process, but we just want to make sure that clearly we're much more engaged in this process and want to make sure we're using public funds as most efficiently as we can. Thank you. So what we need to do now is Councilor Newton.
Next week when you come for that public hearing, will you be able to bring us that salary information? Okay, I'm just gonna say, is it okay if I say something?
Yes.
Okay, so I apologize that my voice is so weak. I was born with a defect to my vocal cords, so I really don't have the capabilities of having a loud voice. I am sorry I just missed the microphone just now, but I want people to know that this is not me not caring or me not having confidence in what I'm saying. It's truly my voice is limited in the volume and the pitch that it can put out. Thank you. But beyond that, what I wanted to say is, will you be able to have the salary information and number of hours for us next week when you come back with this?
Absolutely. And the department head will be here. to answer questions specifically about the position and what the position will do. And I will make sure that the human resources and the department head are ready to answer your questions.
And is there any type of documentation that you think we should see to make, to assure us that it will be coming from enterprise from now on?
I can ask Director Nuttleman to be here, which we've talked about this, and it's something that he feels is important for enterprise to have someone dedicated to water and sewer billing so they can learn the system. And in fact, he's even looked to the future where he feels that this position could be a full-time position that's fully dedicated to water and sewer and learning Neptune and all the intricacies of the water sewer billing, because it's pretty in depth. So I'm sure he would be happy to answer those questions too.
Okay. Just related to that, I'll get to you just a second, Councilor Kuzinski. Can you please provide any of that documentation to the council clerk so that we can have that in the packet?
Yeah, and hopefully Director Russo will hear that.
We'll hear that and get that to you.
Send that email.
As well as communicating that to Director Nuttleman for that and any other people. Yes, Councilor Kuzinski, did you have a question?
I have a comment based on what happened at the last meeting and what's happening now with this, and my conversation with the mayor about the necessity for the position. Had this not been an absolutely urgent and important position to be filled, I would be absolutely out of my mind here tonight with being livid. This is not the process that we accept here in Easthampton. This is a process where you come to the council and all of the staff and the city personnel need to know the council's responsibilities will be fulfilled when it comes to this budget. When it comes to hiring personnel, when it comes to any areas where we are involved. This is important. It will be followed.
Thank you, Councilor Kuzinski. Again, I think I've also stated that to the mayor, so I appreciate that. So what we need to do is we need to set a public hearing for Monday, May 11th. So I will entertain a motion to set a public hearing for Monday, May 11th to transfer $5,000 from free cash to fund new part-time position in the tax collector's office for FY 2026 on, as I said, May 11th at 6:15 in these chambers.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to set a public hearing for Monday, May 11th in these chambers at 6:15. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Great. So the next item on the agenda is the mayor's request for the city council to set a special election for June 9th, 2026 for a vote on a proposed tax levy override of $6,900,000. I have asked that the mayor speak to this prior to public speak so that he can provide information, and then that way individuals will have the opportunity to public speak, address questions, et cetera, to city council, and then we can bring the mayor back up to answer any of those questions that are not able to be answered. So Mayor Derby, I will turn it over to you to provide an overview of kind of why the special election and any information that we need to know.
Sure. And I did, I think maybe the last couple meetings, we've talked about this a little bit. I do want to just say that if I did not have to be here, I would not be here. This is not something that we're electing to do lightly. This is not something that we're doing because we think it's convenient. This is something that we have kind of come to with a very measured and strategic approach and with a lot of seriousness because if you look at historically at the city budgets, which I'll take some responsibility as I was part of that process over the last few years, basically since COVID, the budgets have been growing in relation to inflation, which I think we can all appreciate that inflation has hit us all. It happens to hit the city in a more concentrated way because we're a large entity with, a $65 million budget. So proportionally, it hits us pretty square. We have been using, over the last few years, stabilization money to balance the budget, in addition to some other one-time funds. And, really what that allowed us to do is it allowed us to kind of move the goalpost down the field and be able to, keep things status quo without making cuts. And then I know that as we approached last budget season, it was kind of told to us that there was going to be kind of a new budgeting paradigm that was going to be cutting things a little bit closer around funding, and that's why we agreed to a $4 million plus draw from stabilization to balance the budget. As things became clearer this year and other costs started to come into focus, again, one of the things that caused the delay in timing was not that we just weren't doing our job. It was the fact that, the city was without a treasurer for a while. And in order to be able to catch up from that, we had a consultant come in. Our treasurer started in August, right around the time, I think it was a week after I became interim mayor. And that's really kind of when the hard work started to begin to get everything lined up. And so that didn't kind of come to fruition until free cash was certified in March. As an example, most of the communities that didn't have a disruption were certifying free cash in late October, early November, somewhere in that time frame. So I think that kind of sets the stage for us not really knowing exactly what the true financial picture was until a few weeks ago, when all of the budgets from the departments came in. We saw what the increases were contractually. We saw the impact of health insurance and other fixed costs on the budget. And really the final piece of that was when we got our debt and interest numbers from our financial planner. They came in significantly higher. The interest came in significantly higher than we expected it to be, which, I had been talking previously about a $5.5 million deficit, which if we use some stabilization could get us down to 3.5, and then that ended up being closer to 6.9, 6.8. And then as the numbers came into focus, we realized this was a bigger number than we were going to be able to bridge. My initial plan was, even running for mayor, knowing that we had some structural issues with the budget, that we were potentially going to have to go for an override at some point. I was not expecting to have to go for an override this year. In fact, I was doing everything that I could to try to avoid having to do an override this year, especially in such a short time frame. But when it became apparent there was no way we were going to be able to present a balanced budget without doing something proactive, that's when I came to the city council and kind of announced that we created a budget task force. And the budget task force, did the work of looking at the numbers and making sure that the numbers were in line with something that would really help the city bridge this gap, but also understanding the fact that times are tough and people are struggling, and we have to be cognizant of that. Like, there's a context for this, and this context is not great. But, I think we can all empathize with the fact that times are tough, and times are tough for the city. And one of the things that kind of keeps me moving through this process is understanding, like, what does that mean? We have a lot of people that work for the city, a lot of really good people that work for the city. And I feel really responsible, and I take a lot of ownership around the fact that I don't want to be someone who has to lay off really good people and set our city back. And so, I've been working really hard. The budget task force has been working really hard. I feel like the city council has been working really hard to try to understand this and be part of the solution. So I'll just say that the budget task force basically recommended that we do go for a Proposition 2.5 override. Understanding that the need, actually, in order to get us to a place where we're whole, would be a number closer to 8.5 to 8 million, in that range, which would get us probably 3 to 4 years of fiscal stability using conservative budgeting. And I think that that's one of the things that I just want to say. All of the estimations that we're doing right now we're starting to take a more conservative approach to the way that we budget. So looking at new growth and not anticipating wild new growth numbers, but taking flat new growth numbers in order to do our budget. Looking at state aid, I was expecting earlier in the year, in the governor's budget, there was a 4.4% increase in state aid to the communities. And on the latest cherry sheet estatements, which cherry sheet is what the state aid is, we're down 85,000 from where we were just like a month and a half ago. And so state aid did go up, but the assessments that they charged the city went up too, and more than what we had expected. So knowing that number is higher, we had a discussion at the Budget Task Force saying, hey, what can we do as a city to mitigate costs, to get creative around funding, and to find efficiencies beyond, asking for this bigger number. And we realized that if we asked for a more modest number, then we would be about $2.1 million less than South Hadley's lowest ask, which I think is important. And really, it's something that can get us through the near term without devastating cuts. It's something that can get us through where we will have to make cuts. We will have to tighten our belts. We will have to get creative. We will have to be proactive as it relates to the budget. We will stay on a conservative budgeting kind of tact. So I think it's important to recognize that we are willing to participate in shared sacrifice. We're not just going to sit back and ask to be bailed out. We're going to make difficult decisions. We're going to make hard cuts. I was meeting with department heads all day today, looking at two different budgets and really creating what is a bare bones budget and what is a catastrophic budget. And it's not easy to be in those meetings. It's emotionally draining. It's intellectually draining because none of us want to be in this situation. And really what we want to do is what's best for Easthampton. So when we're coming to you asking for this money, I just want to be clear about what this means for taxpayers. $6.9 million is not a small ask. I mean, it's $2.1 million less than South Hadley's lowest ask, but it's not a small ask. And so let me talk about what this means. So it would add $2.87 per $1,000 of assessed property value to the annual tax bill. A $200,000 home would pay about $573 a year more, $47 a month, and about $1.57 a day. So for a $250,000 house, that's about $717 a year, $59 a month, and $1.97 a day. For a $300,000 house, that's $860 a year, $71 a month, and $2.36 a day. And then the median house in Easthampton, which is worth $418,000, would pay $1,199.64 a year, $99.97 a month, and $3.29 a day. So it's not a small ask, but I think one of the things to acknowledge is that Easthampton does currently have one of the lowest residential tax rates in Western Massachusetts. Hadley being the one that's below us at $11 per thousand, but we're one of the lowest. So, I just want to be clear about what we're committed to do, because I think that this, again, like I said, this is a shared sacrifice. We are going to be cutting positions. We're going to be cutting, as we went through the budget today, we're going to be cutting everything that's extra, from people having to get their own office supplies to not going to conferences, and really kind of changing the way that we do things. And there are going to be some, and I do want to be just clear, because, there are going to be some things that we're not cutting from the budget because they don't come from the general fund, right? So things that are related to enterprise, we don't cut from the budget. There's a couple of capital expenses that we need to fund for supplies for our fire department that are critical for the firefighters to be able to do their job, especially if they're going to be short-staffed. But those funds, when those things happen, come out of capital stabilization, which can't be used to support the general fund. So I just want to make sure, someone's like, oh, there's a new something here. Well, that, capital stabilization has a different set of rules. And, it's important for cities to have a strong, intelligent capital plan, so you don't just let things fall apart and you replace them when they need to be replaced, right? So, this doesn't mean that we're never spending money again, but it means that we're going to do it really with a lot of thought, and we're going to try to be as responsible as we can as we do that. And we're going to make sure that we are living within our means, which I think is a really important thing. So, if we don't do this, which I think is important to state, really the biggest impact is going to be to our schools. And that is, it's a significant part of the budget. The way that we asked people to cut their budget was we took a proportion of the budget and we, asked them to cut a percentage out of their budget based on the size of their department. And the schools is the biggest department. That is going to mean teachers and paraprofessionals and, people that are interacting with our most vulnerable population, our children, are not going to be able to be supported. And that is too bad to have, schools that are really beautiful and very appropriate for educating our young people and not to have them fully staffed. So that's going to be one of the biggest, there's going to be other things too. Police and fire are going to be impacted. DPW, I don't know if many of you do know this, but, just for snow and ice this winter, just for plowing, $635,000 it cost. We have these big expenses that are kind of, you don't necessarily anticipate all the time. And everything does get more expensive. So it becomes harder to run a giant operation like this within the 2.5% margin of increase that we get. And so I think, that's what I want to really focus on is this is, not outrageous. This is something that's happening across the state. And it's something that's happening to a lot of our neighbors. So it's not like we're unique or we did something, bad, but, this is a pretty common thing right now in the Commonwealth. And so I'm hoping that there's going to be some structural changes that can allow for this to give us tools to better manage this as opposed to coming to the taxpayers and asking for more, because this is a tough ask. I will say, one of the things that we are also doing in the background, a few weeks ago I approached Williston. It was in the paper. I proposed a strategic partnership. And really what I was looking for was to help us understand that we need to be symbiotic. We need to, the city's success is going to influence Williston's success. And so, I did ask them to materially support the city, which is the first, I think, formal ask from a mayor to Williston. And I'm really hoping they respond to that, not just by responding to what I think was a pretty modest ask, but I'm really hoping that they maybe go above and beyond. We're also looking at different ways where we can protect our most vulnerable taxpayers, the elderly, and people that are on fixed incomes that are in danger of losing their house. I'm going to be submitting to the city council in the coming days a request to adopt a state law that allows us to put a checkbox on tax bills where people, if they would like to contribute to their neighbors, are able to do that. So I know a lot of people have come to me and said, if I could contribute more, I would, to help people that can't. And this would allow that on our tax bills for people to be able to contribute to people that maybe are going to struggle or be at risk because of this override of losing their house or having a lien put on their house or having to make the decision whether they pay their property tax or their food bills or their medicine. That's not what we want. So we're going to try to be as proactive as we can to find ways to mitigate the impacts of this for as many people as we can. And so as I bring this to you today, I would be happy to try to answer questions. And I hope that I'm prepared to answer whatever questions you have.
Great. Do councilors have questions? Councilor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you don't have, or if this is too technical of a question, I can maybe hopefully just get an answer from Hadel over time, but I would like to better understand with the debt and interest section of the budget, because we didn't bond for a whole lot of stuff in the last couple of fiscal years, or, but most of that has to go through the council. So is it that existing debts had to be refinanced and the interest rates came in higher than we expected, or?
So it was,
what exactly happened there?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer to this other than when it got brought to me. Like, this was when we figured out that we had a bigger chasm. But I do know what happened was when the Honeywell bond was taken, it was taken at a very inopportune time as far as like when you borrow. And then there was another one taken directly after that. It was only like a month or two after. And for some reason, those two had an impact, and I think Hadel would have to answer how those two things kind of being taken at the wrong time and having at a strange time frame impacted, because I didn't get the technical details of that. That was basically the gist of what I got.
Okay, I'll email Hadel, and if I get valuable information, I'll try and share it with you.
Great.
Thank you.
Other question, Councilor Newton.
President Denham, am I allowed to ask about specific numbers at this time?
Sure, if you want to ask a.
Okay, I just
I
want to
don't
make
know
sure.
that he'll be able to answer specific.
So I'm looking at a spreadsheet and it's showing that 2027 proposed, we would need 65,600,000 to run the city. And I think it's saying that if we were to do catastrophic cuts, as you said, it would be 61,984,000. To me, I think that's a difference of less than 4 million. Why are you saying that we need 8.5 million?
So that number includes 2 million of stabilization.
Still doesn't add up to 8.5.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what number you're looking at. Let me see if I can, because I have 65, 674.46 for 27 as
Yeah.
our projected.
Yeah.
And with the budgets that we got, the gap was 6.4 million.
Do you have it, Evan?
Oh, Brooke, yeah, so I think Brooke, our treasurer, is online, so she might be able to answer that.
Treasurer Johnson, are you on the line? I see your hand up. Please state your name and your position for the city.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brooke Johnson. I'm the treasurer for the city. As stated, I have been here since August, so please be patient with me. I'd like to just talk about the budget gap for just a moment. So that 8.5 million to balance the budget would be for years to come. This year we saw about a $3 million increase in our budget from last year. So if we were to continue on to this trend, that is where that $8 million gap comes from.
So I guess my question is what? Sorry. My question is, why do we need 8.5 this year if, and this is what I'm trying to understand, if like or it's really less than 3.8 plus the 2, right, that we're taking from potentially stabilization.
Correct.
If that's
Yep.
5.8, then why is that not good enough? Why do we need 8.5? Without making additional cuts.
Contractual increases, inflation, any other expenses that are on the horizon.
But once
so
we-
if our budget.
Go ahead, finish, Treasurer Johnson.
Yeah, of course. So if our budget increased $3 million from FY 26 to 27, we're looking at a trend of that increase continuing. And unfortunately, we won't have the stabilization funds to bridge that gap in the future.
Councilor Newton, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. So if we were to pass an override for, let's just say it was more like 5 million, our new base would then be much higher than it currently is, and we would still be getting 2.5% the following year. So you don't think that with that new base also increasing, you don't think that's enough for the following year?
No, in fact, I can tell you, so.
Mayor Derby, go ahead.
Yep, sorry. So if we didn't, so let's just say we didn't do an override this year and we just cut. The gap next year will be 7.9, in 2028, 9.5, and in 2029, 15.1. So it compounds every year because of the increased costs and the flat funding source.
I do understand that. I'm asking, oh, sorry.
Counselor Newton?
I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay.
I'm asking what would happen if we went with just what we need for this year as the increase, rather than doing a large override that's 6.9 to cover multiple years.
Yeah, so we
Like,
did talk about that, and that this was part of the budget task force that was discussed with the chair of finance, the chair of the school committee, a CPA from the community, the chair of the board of assessors, our treasurer, and others. And really, if we did that, what would happen is taxes would go up, there would still be cuts, and we'd find ourselves in the exact same position next year. Which is because we would, because this gap is going to grow every year because of the increase of costs and the fact that a lot of those costs are fixed, and those fixed costs are dictating an upward slope of spending where our ability to raise revenue is very minimally capped. And so, this is something that compounds every year. So if we just did a small increase this year, we'd find ourselves in the same position next year. What 6.9 allows us to do is it allows us to have like a little bit of a cushion so we can make some cuts, we can make some contraction, but not have to come back next year. And I think that's one of the most important pieces is we don't want to get ourselves in a position where we ask people to pay more, but don't really give them a lot for that investment. We're going to end up back here.
Are you good? Counselor Peak?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what you just said, since I was on the budget task force and since I was involved in some of the meetings with the Department of Revenue, the general guidance we received, because this isn't something that Easthampton has done a lot as override, so we did have some experts from the Department of Revenue come in and advise us on it. The general advice that they gave is if you ask for the exact amount that you need to plug this year's gap, then next year you're likely to end up in a similar situation. You're going to go to the voters and they're going to say, well, we just voted for an override last year. What happened to that? And so they said that the idea is that the sort of best practice when municipalities are going for these overrides is to try and figure out what you're going to need to be solvent for 3 to 5 years with the anticipated cost increases that you're looking at. So that's sort of the thing here. We could go for a smaller number and we could figure it out for this year, but if we do that, we are going to have to do that with the knowledge that next year we are either going back for a second override, which my general thought is would not be well received, was my general thought, and or the other ideas that you're back to sort of where we were. It helps a bit, but you're back to the same sort of fiscal cliff next year. So that was our logic, and that logic was largely informed by advice we received from the Commonwealth's Department of Revenue.
Councilor Markey?
Everyone will have to forgive me. I'm new to council, so I'm not exact.
Can you move the microphone closer to your?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I am not well versed in finances compared to a lot of the city councilors on here. I trust a lot of the folks around me and stuff. I'm aware that inflation's outpacing the 2.5%. My question is more about health insurance costs, because I know they're a major driver of costs everywhere. Everybody's insurance is going up. And has this number factored in any of the potential future rate hikes by the insurance companies? And I have a second part of that question. Have there been any opportunities explored to renegotiate health insurance perhaps in the future, or something along that lines? Where does it stand with municipal employees?
Mayor Derby?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have factored in what our anticipated costs for health insurance going forward would be into our 5-year projection. We're basing those off of basically what we know that is going to happen in the next fiscal year. It's a 12.48% increase, and kind of extrapolating that across with, modest increases to that, which is, again, that, you're forecasting out to the future. It's not an exact science. We know that healthcare costs are volatile, which is, again, one of the reasons why we want to make sure we don't ask for the exact number of the deficit, because that doesn't give us any sort of ability to adjust to unknowns. And really, and what I've found since I sat at that desk and moved to this podium is there are a lot of unknowns. And so I will say this to the second part of your question. I have directed our Human Resources Director to work with our IAC, our Insurance Advisory Committee, to start preparing and looking at options that are different from the option that we are in right now. Everything is on the table as far as finding ways to reduce costs. And we're not going to leave any stone unturned. So, and I believe it's appropriate for the IAC to do that research, because it's going to affect them. And I know, the city historically has enjoyed Blue Cross Blue Shield. And if we're going to make a change from that, I want it to be coming from the employees that are going to be impacted by it.
Councilor Marquis.
I have a follow-up. Do you know approximately how much of the ask and the override is health insurance?
So,
Mayor, wait, let him finish.
Sorry.
That's it.
Is that it, Mayor Derby?
So this fiscal year, we've been looking at a little bit under $1 million increase.
Councilor Newton.
I'm going back to the same thing. Is it possible for us to ask for a lower amount and make cuts? Because what I've been hearing from a lot of people is that they actually want lots of cuts. So what if we were to take the middle ground and do some cuts and some override? So it's not catastrophic, but we are making cuts so that we don't have to ask for so much.
Right.
Mayor Derby?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was basically the sentiment of the the budget task force, which was, okay, here's what we need to be financially stable for 3 years. We can't ask for that. So we're going to ask for 6.9, because that is the number where we're still going to need to make cuts. Like I said, the number, in order to make us, what the recommended number would be if, say, the DOR guys were figuring out with our budget and the situation we're in now, would have been closer to 8.5 million in order to be fiscally prudent and to give us enough space to not have to come back within 1 or 2 years. What we said was we need to go lower and make cuts. And if we go lower, again, we'll be asking taxpayers to pay more money, and we're still going to be laying off a significant number of people, so people will see a significant interruption to their services. This number allows us to maintain many of the most important services that people rely on, public safety, schools, roads being cleared, those types of things, and gives us a little bit of padding so we don't have to come back next year. So really, this number is kind of that middle ground, because if we asked for significantly less, like I said, people would just have to pay more taxes and they still wouldn't get the services they want.
Councilor Newton?
I hear what you're saying. I'm also looking at a spreadsheet that says the original proposed budget before all this happened was $65,679,000. And the reduced, if it were catastrophic, not the reduced if we get 6.9 instead of 8.5, is 61.9. So I'm still having a hard time understanding why from 8.5 to 6.9, it's only 1.6 million of a reduction, yet we really only need for this year about 4 million. And so I'm having a hard time understanding that piece.
Mayor Derby?
Yeah, so like I said before, that number is supported, and those numbers are out of date as of now, since we've met with departments and because at that point we did not have their catastrophic budgets. That was a kind of an estimation. But really, like I can't emphasize enough, we're not trying to ask for more than we need. Like it's very clear that that comes through. We're not trying to pad the budget for 10 years to come. We're trying to get through this fiscal year without catastrophically cutting positions in our schools and in public safety, and trying to not have to come back to the taxpayers next year. And really, that wasn't, again, this is not these numbers are not my numbers. This is not me presenting this. The budget task force was the governing body that decided what number to ask for and how to kind of approach this. I just happen to be the one answering questions.
Vice President Jadzik.
Thank you, President Denham. You may have referenced this already, and so, but just for clarification purposes, with the 6.9 million number, how many years will that get us?
So honestly,
President Derby.
I'm hoping that will get us at least 3 to 4 years of, if we change the way we do things. If we, again, I'm not saying that we want to be bailed out. We're ready, and I talked about it all day. We're ready to make cuts. We're ready to kind of change the way we do things. We have to change the way we do things. We can't go on status quo. And I think that if we can get creative, if we can find ways like the liquor licenses, if we can find ways to bring new growth to the city, if we can, continue this kind of upward trajectory that the city has, where we can keep bringing more people here and spending more money, that will help us capture new growth. And combined with cuts and combined with the small cushion that we can potentially get through and maintain without having to use our stabilization funds, it will not only give us a better credit rating, so when we do have to borrow, we can borrow at a much better rate, but it will also, and that's our bond rating, which we have a bond call coming up, and they pay attention to these things. They're very clued into this. So, I'm really hoping that we can do this in a way where we can look at this as a path to sustainability. And I'm really hoping, I think truly that path to sustainability is going to include the state kind of changing the way that it does things, because 2.5% is very limiting compared to what we're seeing as inflation goes up.
Other questions? Councilor Smith.
Listening to the proposals that have come forth so far, the one that I have the least faith in, I guess, is kind of the fund the resident, put the check box there. Can you give me a little more detail about how that would be decided as to which residents would receive that fund? Would it be all residents under a certain, within the poverty level, that it would be split among all residents? Would it go to residents within your precinct? Would you be able to name the resident that's going to go towards? So that's my first question.
Yeah, and so that
Derby?
I haven't presented that yet, and when I do, all those details will be laid out. I can say that the chapter and section of state law, I think chapter 60, section 3D, I believe. It's called, it's volunteer tax relief for the elderly and disabled. So it's specific within the state statute for those two populations. It does lay out specific criteria, 80% of AMI, a significant reduced ability to pay taxes. And if there was more applicants that met the criteria than there was funds, then it would be put into a lottery system, where it would be, let's just say we raised $18,000, then probably what that would equate to is 18 allocations of $1,000 to help people offset the cost of any override that might take place.
Counselor Smith.
My next question, that's 18,000, having it only go to 18 people. Has there been any discussion of using the CPA funds as a possible revenue stream to create affordable housing for people who already live here that would be priced out with this?
Mayor Derby?
I believe that I talked to the council president today. I think that that is something that would need to originate from the city council. And I believe that there's movement towards working on that right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Counselor Smith.
In the press conference the other day, one of the things that you brought up was the breaker funds from the state not coming through and school costs going up. And so in Precinct 5, we have two distinct groups. We have the largest population of seniors, and we have a sizable school population. So this is two flips of a coin. If we say yes to this, I'm very concerned about our seniors within the precinct that wouldn't be able to meet this. And if you look at a life, this would be towards the end of somebody's life course. So 1 year versus 3 years is going to be very difficult. So having it be the full 6.9 million versus a smaller amount, on the one hand, you're talking about the long-term sustainability of the city, but on the flip side of that is the real concern that people won't be able to afford to live if we go too high with this override. So I'm wondering, from the perspective of children, if this did not get passed and this was to our schools, can you remind us of the cost that the city needs to pay for each student that goes out of district, and the cost of per student that the city will have to pay for each student that goes out of our district to
Charter school or choice? Yeah, so generally out of district placements are anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per pupil. I think that if we did look at this, one of the things that's important to recognize, there's a couple of things. One is if, this is a catastrophic cut to our schools, there probably are going to be some people that either decide not to choice in or decide to choice out. And that there is a cost to the city there. I think more importantly, though, is one of the hidden costs that we don't really talk about when we talk about layoffs. And, if we're going to be laying off a significant number of people, it's not like we cut them free and are not financially responsible for that. With unemployment costs, we're responsible for about 30% of that person's salary. So if we lay off, dozens of people or more, it's not like we're saving money. We're actually not having employees and we're paying 30% of that salary in unemployment. So we're still losing money. So that's why we're in kind of a catch-22, right? If we lay people off to save money, we have to pay more people to unemployment insurance and we don't have anybody working. So it becomes a very difficult situation. And with the schools, I think it becomes a bit of a snowball effect, and that's why I think a lot of people are really passionate about protecting our schools, because those vulnerable children, having teachers there that are, have the stability that they need and are not concerned about whether they're going to be laid off in the next, months or so, I think is important. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that there are people who this financial impact is real. And, and I think that we should do whatever we can to look at ways to mitigate that and to help those people. So, that's one of the commitments I'm going to make, is to try to find every lever we can pull to help people that can't afford this, that truly can't afford it. Not that just don't want to pay, but actually just can't afford it.
Councilor Smith?
Okay, so along those same lines, can you just repeat for the record why we chose not to go a split rate for our taxes? I mean, I remember all these discussions and I understand it, but there's been a lot of residents who are saying, why aren't we taxing our businesses a lot more?
So,
Derby?
and actually, I would say you can ask yourselves. You can ask me, but the city council is the body that sets the tax rate. And for the 22 years I was on the city council, we kept a single rate. That was generally what was in line with what our Board of Assessors and our assessor recommended, which, I feel like we always take those recommendations to heart. And I know that when we set the tax rate just recently, there was discussion about that, and it was decided to have a single tax rate for next year as well.
Counselor Peak.
Yeah, just on that point, since we were in the finance hearing about it. The trick with a split tax rate is that we have such a small commercial tax base and such a large residential tax base that to raise, let's just say I'm using these numbers off the top of my head, but like to lower your taxes by, for an average residential house by $1, you'd have to increase the commercial tax rate by something like, I think $6 or $7, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's somewhere in that range. Just because the size of those populations are so much different. There are cities that and towns that have really, really big commercial tax bases because they have a big downtown or like a big industrial area and things like that, and so they're able to sort of push those on. But when your residential tax base is so much bigger than your commercial tax base, like every bit of of relief that you'd be giving the commercial taxpayers would be associated with a much larger burden placed on the commercial taxpayers. And when you're talking about Easthampton, it's not like we've got a bunch of Fortune 500 companies here. It tends to be a lot of small businesses that are, just trying to make do on their own. So and it's not to pit one group against each other, but it's just to say that that never really seemed to us like what we could realistically get out of that without just crippling our whole commercial tax base probably wouldn't be a super significant savings for the residential tax base. That's the way that it's been presented to me by multiple principal assessors over the years.
And I would just add, West Springfield has a split tax rate. So that's the level of kind of commercial activity generally that would warrant a split tax rate.
Vice President Jacek?
Thank you. I'm not sure if you'll have these numbers off the top of your head, so, but I'll just ask a question anyway. I'm wondering if you would be able to share with us the approximate total number of employees the city currently employs, and then given the fact that you have created this catastrophic budget, how many employees would be needing to be laid off should we have to go that route?
So a little over 350 employees. And as far as we have a full day tomorrow of budget meetings with department heads, so I don't have that full picture yet. I can say that, there are definitely going to be, personnel that are going to be left out of a job. And as we get to the bigger departments, more so. The larger the department, the bigger the impact is going to be, especially, schools which are personnel heavy and a large percentage of the budget.
Counselor Newton.
When you're doing your calculations about layoffs, are people who are opting for early retirement in your mind considered layoffs? So there is a potential to lower the number of workers without actually laying anybody off if people opt for retirement.
I think in some departments that would be true. But in others, that is not going to be accurate just because of the number of that they're going to have to reach as far as reducing their budget. One of the things that we've been exploring is potentially an early buyout for retirement. So we're crunching those numbers right now to try to, again, leave no stone unturned.
I just, really quickly, I just want to acknowledge, earlier this week I reached out, and this is just context for folks in the room, and then I have a follow-up question. But I reached out to department heads earlier last week, actually, just to say, hey, can you help me understand kind of how inflation has impacted your offices, right? And a few of them were able to reach out to me, and they gave me some real concrete examples. The planning department talked about, within the context of block grant construction cost, gravel, right, was $35 a yard in 2022, and in 2025, it's $60, right? That's an increase, right? And they didn't do anything differently, right? That's just an inflationary cost that they had to take on. Temporary pavement, in 2022 was $180 a ton. In 2025, it's $275 a ton, right? So that's doing nothing, right? They had to incur that. So I think that those are just really important numbers to understand. The health department, they've taken on some personnel increases, right? Because there has just been an increase in the number of inspections that have had to take place. And in part, some of the support that they've been given to the tenants within the city, right? So there's training costs that go along with that. There's operational demands that go into those costs, right? So that is an increase. Parks, their electricity costs have gone up 90%, right? So those are costs, right, that our department heads, our department employees are working incredibly hard for the city, and they are taking on these additional costs that they just had to pay, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that. But I also want to come back to this notion of vulnerable children for just a second, Mayor Derby. Help me understand, because I think there's a human cost to this, right? And if we are expecting, or we are being asked to raise $6.9 million, right? And I think a lot of what we've been talking about is children in schools, et cetera. And if 51% of the kids in Easthampton are low income, right? And we raise $6.9 million, some of those kids' families aren't going to be able to afford to live in Easthampton anymore. So help me understand for myself on this side, how do I reconcile those two things where it's like, I really want kids to have the teachers that they need, and now I just made it unaffordable for them to be here. Like, where's the line? Can you help me understand that? Not to put you on the spot. I was sure you're on the spot, but.
I think that is something that you are going to have to reckon with when you decide what to do. Mm-hmm. Really at the end of the day, this is going to be a personal decision for the people that are going to go to the polls and decide how to vote on this. For me, and, my experience in Easthampton as someone who's lived here for 30 years and spent significantly more time than that here. Someone who coached sports for, close to 2 decades in Easthampton and took kids under my wing and made them part of my family. That was a decision I made to kind of help my community. And I think that as we look at this, we have to understand that if we have an educational system that's strained, kids are going to be spending, during the school year, they spend more time at school than they do at home. And we need to make sure that experience is not only robust, not only safe, not only welcoming, but we need to make sure that it's at the edge of giving these children the skills that they need to be the adults of the future. And so I don't know how we reconcile that. I don't know how we say, we're not going to give you the teachers and the support that you need in order to be a successful, happy citizen of Easthampton, without having some sort of an impact on the family's financial well-being. I would say that, as I have had experience with many, many children in Easthampton as a coach and as a teacher, $3.29 a day I don't want to be glib here, is something that many families, not all families, many families can find a way to absorb. And, for example, like going out to dinner one day a month, right? Now, I acknowledge that some people don't have the ability to go out to dinner one day a month, but that's what the cost of this would be for the average, median taxpayer. So there's going to be, at the end of the day, there's going to be sacrifices, and there's going to be casualties on both sides. And so the question you asked, there isn't a good answer to.
Mm-hmm. And I have another question. Could you help me understand the kind of thinking behind the finance work group that put this together? Why one question and not a pyramid? Why not two questions? Like help us understand, because if we're looking at what has happened in other communities, right? They lost, and some of them they got spanked, right?
Yeah.
It was not pretty. And so if that's kind of the trajectory, or that's the trend of things not passing, why would we not consider, right? Why would the work group not consider two numbers? So one, if the higher number didn't pass, we still might have something, because I think people do want to be supportive, right? But I think there's a line where someone says, I can do this, I can't do that, right? I believe in the kids of Easthampton, but I also believe in my family. And if I can't take on this burden, I'm willing to take on this burden, but it's fiscally I can. And so, yes, I support Easthampton communities or kids. I want to live here, but now I just price myself out of that. So help me understand and help all of us understand.
Sure,
that
and I just want to, the decision of this body actually is going to be the decision that part of that could be.
Yep.
So what we did was set a recommendation, basically looking at other overrides that have passed or failed, recognizing sometimes it's better to keep it simple, and that, having more than one number confused a lot of people. And taking that into account, we decided to try to keep it simple.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Peak, I assume you might want to respond to that.
Sure, just my perspective on there. I actually initially really liked the pyramid idea for that exact reason of saying, well, if we can't get everything we need, wouldn't it be better to make sure that we could at least get half of what we need or something like that? So that's something that, look, if the council wants to debate that, we can, obviously. It's ultimately our call. The thing that made me kind of nervous about it was monitoring some of the discourse around South Hadley and the sheer number of people. So South Hadley had a $9 million number and then an $11 million number. There was a lot of people in South Hadley who were saying the city's asking us for $20 million. Or they're saying, the idea about it was that if you voted for both, then if you voted for both the 9 and the 11, and then the 11 did get enough votes, then just the 11 would go through and not the 9. Our concern was that there was pretty widespread misunderstanding about that in South Hadley, who had a much longer time to spread information about that than what we have because of how late our budget picture came into focus for us. So it's not something that I think that anyone on the budget task force was squarely and categorically against, but that was a concern that if we're going to discuss this as a body, I just want to share, that was something that we did observe, and it was something that I worry maybe put them in a worse situation. So that's just where I was.
That's helpful context, right? I think that's important information for people to see kind of what's the thinking, right? But I think you're right, and I think it's important for the council to understand that what has been put forward can be amended, right? So it doesn't have to be a single question, it could be a pyramid, etc. So I just want to acknowledge that. I saw some other hands going this way, and then I will come back this way. Councilor Kwasinski, we haven't heard from you yet.
just reviewing some of the numbers that have come up, because numbers are spinning in my head now, and I'm sure they're spinning in everyone else's head. And we want to do the right thing. Gravel costs stuck in my head. Counselor Denham had said $35, I believe, a ton. In 2025.
2022 and
2022, turning into $60 a yard, which was, according to my calculations, a 71% increase. The pavement, $180 a ton in 2022, $275 a ton in 2025, a 53% increase. Electricity costs for the Parks Department up 90%. How do you raise 2.5% a year and begin to cover some of those costs? You don't. You fall behind. That gives me great pause, because we have to turn around and deal with this and not lose our entire city. So I really like the idea of looking at this and saying, maybe we need to come up with another figure, a figure that will get us through over the next horizon. Because I look at the figure that was your median figure for the 6.9 million, and that was at a $418,000 assessment, which isn't that far off the mark these days with values. That's almost $100 a month. $100 a month. And that's a hard pill to swallow for many, many, many folks in our city. Yet they know we have to deal with those 75% increases, 90% increase in costs, 53%, and deal with that. I'm hoping that there's a figure somewhere between that $100 for the average taxpayer, something less, that carries us through. Is it possible to carry us through for a year or 2 year horizon? I know the DOR gave us some other figures, but I don't think there's the will and the time to set this sail correctly so that it can be really understood by the citizens who we're asking to vote. They're gonna have to vote when? We're talking about June 9? A month and a half. They'll be barely able to get out and make it to the polls and say, okay, I have to vote, and there's an election coming. Not to be able to understand the depths of what is being asked. Not that we're not facing a situation. So my question to the mayor is there some way to see a 1 or 2 year horizon? And yes, I understand that 1 or 2 year horizon doesn't put us in good stead for the future, but it might carry us through our current needs with some significant cuts and a small override.
Mayor Derby?
So, as the budget task force looked at this, that was a question we asked, and we looked, pretty low down on the spectrum of override amounts. And, the reason why we settled at 6.9 was because that one was, and I hesitate to call it the Goldilocks number, but it was really the number that got us to a place of stability and was less of an impact on the citizens than, again, remember, this is $2.1 million less than South Hadley's lowest ask. So I just want to acknowledge that one more time. $2.1 million less than South Hadley's lowest ask. And so the reason why we decided to, scale it back was because we knew that it is an ask. It's not easy. This is going to be, with 6.9, there's going to be shared sacrifice. With no override, we're in a pretty dire spot as it relates to services in the city.
Councilor Marquis.
I have more of a comment to make than a question. President Denham touched upon, it's hard to reconcile kids that are lower income or in poverty versus the implications of a big tax bill versus a good education, et cetera. I'm sure, again, President Denham will identify with this, but I don't come from means. I'm a working class guy. I live barely above the poverty level. I don't own any property, so I won't really be paying any more taxes, but we all know everything kind of flows downhill. And my rent might go up, everybody will be paying more, and I'm not going to tell anybody if this is put forward how to vote. But I will say that though I will not be paying any property taxes, I would gladly fork over $1,200 in order to make sure the kids of this town got the free lunch, got the after-school programs. And I know that some people that own property can afford more than other people. And I've spoken to both types of folks in this town, like $1,200. That's like, I'm really cutting it then. And I've heard other folks say, I'm all for it. Sign me up for more. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, if we're not going to do it, people in Easthampton, and I love this town, people in Easthampton, the who's of Whoville, aren't going to pull together and save this town. Who's going to? And yeah, we've seen a lot of folks, a lot of towns around the area not passing the thing, not passing the overrides, and dire financial straits. A lot of it out of our control. I don't know what the federal government's doing at this point. I really don't. But yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow, and I hope that at the end of the day, the people of Easthampton, they help their neighbors and we figure it out together.
Councilor Jamrog McQuaid?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So I have a couple comments, and then I have a question that maybe you'll be able to answer, Mayor Derby. So I just want to acknowledge the stress that we're all under. I'm hearing everyone heavy breathing over on this side of the table, and I'm sure many people in the audience too. I'm sure I see the stress on your face as well. This is not a fun situation to be in. I think it's also important to acknowledge why, I think in a broader scale, why we're here and why are costs increasing. I think that this is something that's beyond our control, and a lot of it comes down to like corporate greed. The increase in health insurance, like I know I'm preaching to the choir in a lot of ways on that front, but I think that when we're looking at what this means for our community, it's important to understand that this is being done to us. This is an external storm that we're weathering, and we need to be really intentional about how we're shifting the burden of that storm and whether or not we're going to let the most vulnerable people of our community suffer for that. That being said, you've mentioned a couple times, or you've used the word a couple times, catastrophic cuts. And as someone who benefits from city services, I'm a homeowner in town. I have a niece that's in Tiny Tots at the high school. Can you just, I'll also add, like I'm been cheering on We the People and all the amazing work that they've been doing. So I guess, and not to fearmonger, but I want to hear more if you could explain what that catastrophe looks like and what the human face of that would be in the city.
Mayor Derby?
Sure, and I would, since I haven't met with the school department, I hesitate to give any like hard numbers. I will just say that because the school department is the biggest, percentage-wise, the biggest, department in the city, they would be hit the hardest. So when I say, catastrophic, that is coming from an educator who, received a pink slip every year for the first 5 years of teaching, and knowing that sometimes that's part of the sacrifice you make to educate young people. But it would mean that we would lose a lot of educators. And then beyond that, it means that, in public safety, there would be positions for sure eliminated, across police, fire, and EMS. And that would have a significant impact on our costs for overtime, because when you minimize staffing levels and someone is out or someone is injured or someone is out on FMLA, then you have to bring in people at overtime. While there's a lot of ways that we can be short-sighted when we look to the future of the budget, and one of the most short-sighted ways that we think that we're saving money is by just making these huge cuts. But generally what that's going to do is it's going to reduce services significantly, but it's not going to reduce costs in the way where if we could just cleanly, sever an employee. Like I said, unemployment costs are 30% of that employee's salary. The overtime costs are going to come back on police, fire, and EMS. And response times are going to suffer. The ability to be able to plow our roads in an effective, we all know when we go to different towns from Easthampton, our roads are the best. It's not going to be, and if we don't have the people to do that work, it's not going to be like that. And I don't want to fearmonger, which is I'm trying to be general because this is not my override, right? This is, an override that is happening because the city has found ourselves in a place where we need to figure out the can has been kicked down the road. It's time for us to pick it up, examine it closely, and figure out what we can do to repair that can.
Councilor Newton? Oh, actually, did you have a follow-up question? Councilor Newton?
Okay.
You're good. Councilor Peak?
Sort of to that point, actually, I've got a question. But before I have the question, I just want to make one quick comment, which is just for the helpfulness of this discourse, because there's going to be a lot of these conversations to come. I just want to remind my colleagues and the public who's about to get an opportunity to speak that what's really before us tonight is whether we want to place a ballot question for an override on the ballot, and if we do, the number, the structure, and these are the questions before us. Whether or not an individual person should vote on the override is a question that's going to dominate public discourse. So should we vote yes for a solid month and a half? And we're going to get a lot of good opportunities to talk about the pros and cons. But there's a lot of great questions, but I think that there's some of this that I just want to just remind folks of what is actually before us as a question tonight. With that being said, we've gotten a lot of questions, and I'm sure we're going to continue to get a lot of questions from the public about what is the actual impact of this. And I just want to share my understanding of how that process is going to work as it relates to this body. And then Mayor Derby, this kind of been drinking from a fire hose, so if there's things that I misunderstood, I'd love for you to explain to me what I got wrong. Sure. So we are going to be presented at the next city council meeting with two budgets. We normally get one budget and we discuss that budget in a series of budget hearings. Instead, we are going to get two budgets, one for if the override passes and one for if it fails. The mayor generally has a lot of power to set the budget at a certain thing, and then we really can make cuts, but that's really all that we can do. Given these highly unusual circumstances and the limited situation, I hope that the department heads and the mayor will be flexible in listening to suggestions that the council or the public might have about, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? Because I really think that that is an important part of these things, is that that people with different perspectives have the ability to weigh in and say, you're proposing cutting this position, but did you think about maybe consolidating these and things like that? But those are going to be conversations that are going to be exhausting, probably, and not particularly fun, but that are going to be public, right? Like if people think that if people think that they have a suggestion on how to do this better, how we can save costs, how we can do things better, they are going to be able to speak in those meetings. If the meeting concludes, they're welcome to ask me via email any questions that they might have, and I'll do my best to get answers. But the idea here is that we're going to come out of this process going into June with two budgets, one assuming that an override passes and the other assuming that the override fails, and the exact detail of what's different in each of those positions is going to be explained in painstaking detail, because whatever the department heads are thinking it's going to be, ultimately that decision, those two budgets will have to be approved by this council. And so I bring this up just to say that there's information that we don't have now because we can't have it now because we haven't completed the budget process that's necessary before we come to any final number on those things. But that process is about to kick off, and I really, really, really want everybody, I really urge people to pay attention and to weigh in, because I want everyone to understand exactly what we're talking about here. And even those of us who are on the budget task force, you know, we have an idea, but it's gonna get more clear as we go through those meetings and ask some hard questions and new information comes to light. Did I get anything wrong?
No.
Mayor Derby.
You got, I would say that that's really correct, and I would, you know, for those department meetings, I think it's gonna be really important to have people participate and to be involved with that, to see, you know, what the difference is between the two budgets. And to ask those questions, like, especially counselors, I know, you know, as we enter into quorum issues, you know, but, you know, having questions that are, if you, you know, you can speak as a member of the public if there's quorum issues, and ask questions. And I would also say, like, writing questions down and submitting them would be also acceptable. But, you know, like, the committee level is where those questions need to be asked. And so I think that part is really important.
Mayor Peak.
Oh.
You just got an upgrade, Tom. I'll see.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
thank you.
I was looking at Mayor Derby and so
Yeah, if you wanna.
hey, I'm called Mr. President all the time.
Yeah, all right. No, thank you. So, yeah, just a couple
Did you want to go up to the mic and answer?
no, I don't. I do not want to do that one little bit. Okay, so, yeah, just a couple. The first thing that I just want to say, I just want to, and you know what, the second thing I forgot because of that distracting, funny moment.
I apologize.
It's fine. We're all human. But the first thing I just want to say is, like, I had alluded to this, but I just kind of want to ask it again a little bit. Like, just given the highly unusual circumstances here and given the ask that we're putting before people, just can I ask for a certain level of flexibility in those hearings that might go beyond, like, there's been a lot of budget things in the past where it's like, oh, I think that you should do this instead of this. The feedback's sort of been like, okay, that's your opinion. Yeah. Which is what our charter absolutely allows, but just given the situation, if there's somebody from the public who has, like, a great idea, that something that we missed because we're all just humans with our own perspective, like, I'd love to be able to have that conversation without this sort of being like, well, the hay's in the barn and, you know, like, it is what it is, you know?
I mean, yeah, the hay might be in the barn. And I think hopefully for the counselors that have been my colleagues for many years, you know that my level of rigidity is more a level of flexibility, because rigid things break, and I'm not trying to break this budget. So, you know, for me, that is a perfectly reasonable ask, because I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do within our power to make this right. So I would never take a good idea because it's not mine and discount that.
Okay, thank you.
I am going to let Councilor Schmidt have a word now.
I'll just weigh in real quick. Comment, which is first, just thank you to all of you for asking such great questions. It's been really, you know, useful and for the information to take this all in. Before we hand it over, I did want to ask, just related to the finances, you know, you shared some numbers for varying degrees or for varying sort of property values And I just wanted to ensure and sort of make it known to the public if there are any plans in place to kind of make that information accessible on sort of a personal level. I understand that there are formulas that other cities use to help inform their public, and can you speak for a moment just about what might be in the works and made available to people to kind of put in their own numbers and see what the impact would be on themselves?
So there are tax rate calculators that are online. Really, if you just Google tax rate calculator, there are ways to find so you can see what the impact would be for different varying amounts. I've put together some information as I was working with the budget task force around, kind of more, not infographics, but more graphical information to help kind of understand the different amounts and what they do and how they help us. It's the teacher and me putting together a presentation, right? And so I do have that information. I'm happy to share it. I do have to be a little careful because I can't really use my resources to advocate for, but I can use my resources to give information. And I'm happy to put as much information out there as I can to help people get a better understanding of what the impact of this would be, what the costs look like depending on your property values, et cetera. And I do have access. We've done a 5-year projection that the budget task force was kind of using as our baseline. So we do have, plenty of information, and I'm happy to share that with anybody that would like to have it. So if you have constituents that are asking questions, then you can be more, point them to the appropriate information.
Sure, just to...
Councilor Schmidt.
If I could just clarify, just to make sure that we're on the same page here, I'm speaking specifically about the amount of, what their specific increase would be following a potential successful vote.
So, I have, like I said, I have some good infographics specifically around different property values.
Gotcha.
So I did a range from 200 to 750,000. I figured that was, and I do have that, and I can email it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you share that actually with the council clerk, and then she can share that out to all the rest of us? Great.
Sure.
You have a Councilor Peak.
Just one thought, if it just related to Councilor Schmidt's idea. My understanding is that the assessed values of every property in Easthampton are public record. They're available all on the GIS.
GIS.
So if you could, I think, I'm sure that the assessor has this, and it's never been shared with me, but if we could just get that spreadsheet, I'm sure that myself or Councilor Jamrock would have use in this, could create some sort of easy, Google-based lookup tool where someone could put in their address and it would explain the whole thing to them very, very quickly. So that's just something that we could quickly do. It's just, it would be a pain to pull those each manually from the GIS, so I just need access to the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure we could ask someone from the assessor's office to help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Councilor Schmidt.
I do have one last question. It's more like systems, how the election would work, as opposed to the finances side of things. Would it be appropriate to ask that now, or would you prefer to hold on to that?
Well, essentially what's going to happen, we have a proposal. And what we will do as a council is we will make a motion to approve or not approve. And at that time, councilors will have the opportunity to make amendments to that as well. And then at that point, we will vote to move forward with an override set for June 9th, or we will not. And Councilor Schmidt.
If my question goes further than that, would you prefer I hold on to it, or would now be an okay time to ask?
Sure, we're already down that road.
Okay, so I guess just what I'm curious about is, if we do vote to schedule an election, I was curious if, essentially what can be done to make that accessible for folks in terms of ways of voting. I just wanted to confirm if there were such options for a local election like this, or if it's basically like, this is election day, people have to go to the polls, and that is kind of the only option available.
I'm going to let our clerk answer that question.
Answer that. So in Massachusetts, we always have absentee voting, which is an excuse voting. you will not be physically able to go to the polls out of town on election day or religious reasons, you can't make it. Absentee voting, they can vote in the office or by mail. We will also have early voting by mail, which is no excuse voting. Anyone can early vote by mail. We have not had early voting in person in the past for local elections. There is an extra, cost associated with that. So I think that will cover everything fairly well. Of course, we'll have election day voting. We will be open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I did check with the company that prints the ballots. They said after I get the proof to them, we should get the ballot within about a week. So if we go forward with this schedule, I think we would have the ballots around the second week of May and start mailing them out right away.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open this up for public comment. And the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna start with folks who are in the room, and then we will move to the folks who are online. You're going to have 1 3-minute opportunity to speak, right? So please have your thoughts concise, orderly, etc. If you have questions in that, please ask the question. We will write it down. You can continue within your 3 minutes. And then we will invite the mayor up to answer questions after we get a series of them, so that we can kind of move things along. But what I don't want, and the reason why I'm asking you to ask your questions and continue with your 3 minutes, is I don't want you to use up your 3 minutes, right, going back and forth in a conversation. So I want you to be able to say everything that you want to be able to say in those 3 minutes, right? So I think in the past, there's been some back and forth, and that, sadly, that just eats up your 3 minutes of time. So I want you to be able to say everything that you want to say. Also, I'm going to ask that you not applaud or holler or yell, or that just eats up your time, right? So I just want to make sure that we do this in a really orderly fashion. We are going to have a clock going, right? When you have 30 seconds left remaining of your 3 minutes, you will hear an alert, right? That first alert is just to let you know you have 30 seconds left. When your time is up, you will hear a second alert. At that time, it is important that you wrap up your thought, right? And then I don't want to have to gavel you close. Just please wrap up your thought, finish that. I really don't like using this thing. Because I want to be respectful. I know that, well, we've got a train going, we've got a whole lot going, so just try to make sure it will be a loud enough alarm. Yeah, so we don't want you to, we want you to hear it, but not be startled by it or feel that it's over, right? Can we all agree to that? Can we be respectful of that? Great. So what I'm gonna do is just go ahead, people are gonna stand up, you're gonna come to the microphone, right? You're going to state your name and your address for the record, okay? All right, so it looks like Dan Rist is ready to go. So we're gonna have Chairman Rist come to the podium and state your name.
At least you didn't call me mayor.
I didn't call you ma'am either.
Dan Rist, 26 Line Street, Easthampton. I was a 27-year member of the city council, and for probably 20 years, I was on the finance committee and a chair of the committee for many of those years. So I know our city's finances. I know them really well. And I want to give my comments today is to lend credibility to what this budget situation is. If people don't think that it's real, they don't understand inflation, they don't understand what happened with COVID, 20% increase in inflation over those years. Healthcare costs 52% in just 2 fiscal years. That's including the 27 ask. Labor contracts, they deserve to have increases, and they only ask for 3% or 4%. But we have a Prop 2.5. You do the math. That doesn't work. So this budget situation is real, and I wanted to let my experience give you that credibility. An override is absolutely necessary in my mind. What that number is going to be up to you. And I want to make an aside here because Tom just gave me a lot of information about South Hadley being confused. I'm going to recommend to you that if you choose a number, just do one number. Because if our people are confused, they're going to vote no to both because they'll think it's double. So please, I think he brings up a fantastic point. Choose the number, but only put one number on the ballot. That's just my feeling. If this override fails, it is real. You're going to lose a lot of teachers. The school department is half the budget. $30 million? And if it's 10% of the budget, that's $3 million. Ask the school department what that means. It means, and it's real, no sports, no theater, no art. That's a real thing. Police officers and fire personnel, that reduces response time. And if there's a response time loss and you have a crime, that's dangerous. Maybe if we vote no, if everybody wants to vote no, the senior center will close. That means 30 seconds? Is that what that means? Okay. Or maybe the park will close. I am going to say in my own view, I can pay $1,200, I will be paying $1,200 next year if it's a full 6.9. That's a lot, that's $100. I'm willing to pay that. But if you go with a smaller one, maybe that's more appealing to people. $600 for half of that is what I would be paying personally because of my assessment. And that's only $50 a month. So just take that in consideration. But a no vote is extremely dangerous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Right. William Joss, Joss, 60 Division Street. First, I would like to suggest we stop buying gravel. No, seriously, the other point I want to make, though, is that this is not a one-year deal. If this override passes, that amount is going to get paid extra from now on, every year, unless you somehow reduce the taxes, which you probably can't. So I think you should emphasize that this is an ongoing expense. It's every year. And the second thing is one of the people on a fixed income, I know you can't do it, but you should consider what the Social Security increase is per year. And it's nowhere like this. And that's what we're living with. And finally, you did explain that we didn't have a treasurer. Can someone explain how we could have gotten to the point of not having a treasurer and getting ourselves into this hole? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kathy Wizinski, Overlook Drive. So I want to point out a couple of pieces of information that citizens should know. That if we're looking at a property tax increase, we are also looking at a dollar amount increase to our CPA. Because our CPA funds, the money we pay for CPA is based on the amount of our property tax. It's a percentage of that. So it's not just the property tax going up, it's your CPA contribution that's going up. The Board of Public Works has already voted on an increase to your water and sewer bills, and those increases are likely going to continue for the next 3 years. So we're not just looking at an increase in our property taxes, but we're looking at an increase in multiple things. I commend the city councilors for their sternness in discussing this. It's unfortunate that you spent so many years pandering to the last mayor and not pushing for the appropriate discipline in the budget that should have occurred. It is my feeling that every city councilor, every school committee member, and the former mayor are personally liable for the situation that we're in currently. This body seems very interested in spending more time on resolutions. I suggest we look at a resolution to our state to complete the audit so that we can figure out where the fraud, waste, and abuse is and try to get the money that should be coming to the local communities back to the local communities where it belongs. Because we shouldn't be spending this much money when there's so much being wasted at the state level. And I don't see any advocacy from any of you pushing our governor
to suck it up and not waste so much of our funds. One of the things that we're considering in Easthampton Active Citizens will begin initiative petition to remove the CPA program, to reduce that percentage on our bills. And anybody interested in that initiative petition can message us at Easthampton Active Citizens. I think it's really disingenuous to include this meeting as outside of the regular meeting schedule, to not having any information at the last meeting about this special city council meeting. It looked like it was an attempt to avoid citizen input. Thankfully, we pay more attention than you think we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Please state your name and address for the record.
Darlene Orvieto, 37 Mutter Street. We do pay more attention than you think we do. And yes, you're wrong. This is not out of our control. Kathy and the last two people who spoke, as they clearly stated, there's a source to this problem, and it was pandering to the last mayor, who was very disingenuous in almost all her dealings. And I think we know that what we're having to deal with now, it comes from the governors. It comes from the mistakes of the governor. So I think no override until every citizen can see the budget. No secrecy. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Mateusz Marcinowski, 7 West Lake Street. I'm here because of my son, who is a recipient of special education in Easthampton. Good evening, and thank you to the City Council and the Mayor for your willingness to engage in this important issue. I truly appreciate the effort to come together as you are doing tonight to work through a very difficult situation for our city. I want to acknowledge what I think many of us are feeling. Easthampton is in a very serious financial position. I understand how important this override is, and I don't take that lightly. My hope is that both the city and its residents will ultimately make the right decision. In my opinion, that means supporting the override. At the same time, I also recognize that there are no real winners here. This is not an easy choice for anyone. That said, my concern lies in what feels like an increasing reliance on raising property taxes as a long-term solution. I fully admit that I don't have a complete understanding of every detail driving the current budget situation that we are in, but it seems clear that rising healthcare costs and inflation are major factors, issues that are largely outside the city's control. So it raises an important question. Does this mean we continue increasing the tax levy year after year? And if so, where is the limit? At what point does that approach stop being sustainable? At what point do we risk reaching a breaking point where residents, especially those who are already stretched thin, simply can't afford to live in Easthampton? I don't bring up this criticism, but as a genuine concern about the long-term path forward. I understand that this is a very difficult decision, and I respect the responsibility you all carry in making it. Last, I wanted to just encourage the citizens of Easthampton to talk about this and dialogue and come together as one, even if we have different opinions. This is a body, and we have to come together even when we don't agree on something. We have to look past our differences and work through this together, through discussion and dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. Name is James Ramsey. I live at Campbell Drive, and I've been here in Easthampton my whole life. So I've heard a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this. The cushion. The cushion, I'd like a cushion. And these are just, I have question marks after these, but you don't have to, I'm not asking for an answer right here. But like the state money, where is the state money? Where is the pot money that we were all promised? You know, they say Easthampton's in good shape, but if you've driven down Main Street, it's bad. That's the showcase. So I'd like a backyard pool and a full arcade, but I don't have one. It's not in my budget. I live within my means, and I don't drink coffee. So that cup of coffee thing, that was a classic line. For the children, classic line. There's a box that you can check when you do your taxes. Your income taxes. There is a box that you can check to pay more taxes. I'm just wondering, I'd be real curious to know who checks that. Who wants to pay higher taxes? That's a box you can check on your taxes. I don't want to go too deep, but I'm just saying I am one of the senior citizens now, so, in Easthampton. And I paid for my kids to do the sports when that came up you have to pay to have your kids bused. I paid for that. The public safety building, we overrode for that. We overrode for the school. I did for 2 schools, actually. This third one, enough. And I'd like to close with, where can I get me one of those imaginary $200,000 houses? Because I don't know where they are. That's all.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramsey.
It is a difficult decision. I know that.
Please state your name and address for the record. And also, I'm going to ask again, please don't shout out or comment or anything like that. It really is distracting, and it takes away from their time.
Hi, my name is Nori Coleman. I live 52 East Street, Easthampton. I want to know if you guys have ever heard the saying, charity begins at home, because that's something that I've always taught my children. And Easthampton is our home. And as a citizen of Easthampton, we say that we're a welcoming city, but are we welcoming our citizens first? Because our state has put out $8 million in the fiscal year of 2025 for emergency shelters of illegal immigrants. And everybody's so surprised at inflation. Wow, where everything's inflating. I wonder why. I wonder why our taxes are going up. And I am, my father was an immigrant from Yemen. He was a legal immigrant. I have siblings that have legally and paid money to come into this country legally. We are paying the cost of illegal immigrants, and that is why we have inflation. We are a welcoming city, but we're not welcoming our own residents, citizens of Easthampton, because we're going to raise our taxes to pay $30,000 a year rental assistance for each illegal family. My 2 daughters are still living at home. One's going to school for nursing. She's working full-time as a CNA. The other one is working full-time as a behavioral analyst. They can't afford their own homes. They're still living at home because we don't put our own citizens first. Bad politics make bad politics. And that's what's happening in America. And it trickles down to each city. In Easthampton, we're seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Patty Cavalli, Maxine Circle. I first want to commend you and thank you for allowing us to speak, and I'm really impressed with this council. I'm loving the fact that you're considering our elderly, our low income. In my line of work, I get calls for the people that are losing their homes because of your decisions. I have to try to help them or make them understand that they're losing everything they worked their whole life for. And I cry at my job because of it. So I am so happy to hear you consider them because they don't have anybody going to bat for them. Elderly people have worked their entire life. People can't retire because they can't afford to. I know Mr. Rist and Mayor Derby think that this is just a little bit of money, but for a lot of people out there, and I know that for a fact, it is more than just a little bit of money. It means they're gonna lose their homes, and it's happening. Believe me, it's happening. If you ever wanna talk to me outside this meeting, I'll tell you. No facts, no personal information, but it's a fact. And it breaks my heart, and I am so happy to hear you take them into consideration, and I thank you for that, trust me. Mayor Derby, I heard you talk about...
You're talking to the council.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One of his comments was how concerned he is about the employees. Well, yes, we're all concerned about the employees, but do they all live in Easthampton? Are they all residents of this town? Is he putting the employees above us residents? That disturbs me. I thought he was our mayor, not the employees' mayors. We're all in the private sectors. We all can lose our job anytime, any day. Our insurance costs have gone up, and we compensate. I think you have to sit back and compensate within our budgets. You can do it. I'm in the financial arena. You can go line by line. You can make adjustments. You can make cuts, and yes, they hurt. But you've got to do that first. The first thing you're going for is the expense of a special election, adding more cost to an already distressed situation. I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense to me as a resident in the financial arena. Spend more money. What are you telling us? I don't understand it. So please consider this. There are other ways to solve this. You have to use your ingenuity, and the residents in this town do have a lot of knowledge, and thank you for acknowledging that also. So I do commend this council, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jess Atkins-Barber, 22 Vaudney Street, Easthampton. Hello, City Council. I'm a 10th grader at Easthampton High School, and the amazing Easthampton school system has raised me my entire life. As the budget override looms over everyone, it's important that we work together and stay connected as a community to push through this time. I think that everyone understands this override will be hard on many, but we live in a country that is based on a social contract. An agreement between the government and the people that if we pay taxes, we will in turn get things like police, fire, senior services, schools, and the upkeep of our infrastructure. This idea dates back to the 1600s and has been reflected in the founding principles of the U.S. since 1776, the birth of our nation. So, as many may disagree with the override, I think it's important that the city moves forward on one to continue the promise it has shown to its residents for generations. Easthampton is a little city with a big heart, and we need to be cautious and caring towards not just each other, but you, the city council, and the mayor, as we move forward through this time of financial uncertainty. I also want to mention that I could not begin to imagine Easthampton schools without every single teacher, staff member, club, sport, art, and program there currently is. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Kathleen Joss. I live at 60 Division Street. That was tough to follow. I just like to go back in
I believe that you can do a great job.
Okay, so I didn't intend to speak this evening, but something that was said by the mayor within the first beginnings of his talk was 6 to 8 more liquor licenses. And I'm concerned about 6 to 8 more liquor licenses here in this town. Where would they be? Do we really need them? Are we going to be a party town? I'm a walker, and I walk a lot, and you might as well rename Plain Street 191 because they go down there like they're doing something on the highway. And please donate, please allow me to be your collector. Let me give out tickets, and I will raise you money for this town and take none for myself, because there is nothing but speeding going on in this town on every road that I walk. Now, today, I just happened to go past Fire Ants. There was an accident there with this little red sports car all crunched up, and I'm thinking, on this dry day, on an early afternoon, why is this car in that condition? Why? You know, why you need a fire department, you need the ambulance, there's this whole big thing going on because 2 people couldn't control their cars. So you're gonna add 6 to 8 more liquor licenses to the town. I'd like to know why, and I don't think they're gonna make that much more money for you. I would raise more money if I gave out speeding tickets, and be the speeding trap. We have lived in many different places. There's a town that's a speed trap. Don't speed through it and you won't get a ticket. Back in the old days, speeding tickets used to be $100 and then $10 for every mile you went over. So it was a $150 ticket most of the time for most people. So I don't know why you're afraid to give out speeding tickets. And I know it's a manual thing. It costs people to have a guy out there doing this. But be the speed trap. Let people know if they go through Easthampton, they're going to get a ticket. Period. And all you have to do is scare them for a while. It doesn't have to be forever. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Carol Broder, 72 Oliver Street, Carol with a K. I'm so against the override. I think we need to live within a budget. I think, I want to say when the mayor was speaking, it was all I could think of was blah, 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 blah. All we hear is fire, school, 1 minute it's health benefits on the rise. Well, I just had a major surgery and have had major surgeries, several. I'm a retired, disabled retired ER nurse, not by choice, but by health. I know the cost of health care. I know what I pay. I know what it costs me continually to go for all the appointments that I have and surgeries that I have and physical therapy. We need to make the cuts. Talk about catastrophic. You want to use the buzzwords that try to cause fear in people. 1 minute's health costs, well, no, then it's fire, then it's police, then it's school. We always use those buzzwords when we're looking for, the city's looking for money. It's always the road. Pot's going to get us more road money. The pot's going to get us more school money. I don't see it on our roads. I don't see improvement on our roads. I don't see the services that we're getting for supposedly this budget. I'm just terribly against it. Especially what's happening, we don't need more low-income housing or moderate-income housing to add to our sewer cost and this isn't just a real estate tax. On the questionnaire that was put out, maybe it was a sample questionnaire for the yes, no. It's not just real estate taxes, it's personal property. Personal property taxes, people need to look that up, what that means with the state and with the city and what you can do with that and what fees you can get charged for against personal property, machinery, different things on your property that can be taxed. So I'm very much against it. We need to live within budget. We've all lived in budgets. I've had to cut out so much. I couldn't even afford a dog because I can't afford the food, can't afford the veterinary bill. We all have to pinch our pennies, and I think the city needs to start doing that as well, and stop hiring people with grant money that ends up being a permanent position, benefit position when it was only supposed to be a temporary position. It's garbage. Be transparent. That's baloney that anything's transparent. Nothing has been transparent. Thank you. I do appreciate your time. I do appreciate the questions that were brought up. I do appreciate the voice thing because I had my vocal cords on one of my surgeries that was cut and I couldn't talk. People don't know how precious a voice is. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Chris O'Connor, 21 Ashley Circle. I am adamantly opposed to the 2.5 override. I will start with some facts. Number one, Easthampton citizens did not cause the $8 million gap. And I take the $8 million as being 6.9 plus the 1.1 that was referred to by Mayor Derby. Number two, Easthampton citizens were not told about this until we were $8 million in the hole. not at $2 million, not at $4 million, and not even at $6 million. Number 3, Mayor Derby wants Easthampton citizens to pay $7 million in tax increases to cover that gap. Number 4, elected officials are required to make the cuts necessary to balance the budget, just as we do in our own budgets at home. That would take care of the current crisis at hand, the crisis created and allowed by our elected officials by our city processes. A former city councilor, Owen Zarrett, had posted an online entry on April 15th that I really appreciated and is related to these facts. He shared that he recognizes and even partially owned the lack of diligence and attention needed for Easthampton's budgeting stewardship in the past, and that potentially contributed to this gap, and that the business financial acumen is not as present or strong in the elected officials as it perhaps should be. I really appreciated Owen's transparency and his intent to help us improve and assist Easthampton to be better and going forward. You can actually feel his sincerity in his post. By identifying the problems, owning he was probably a part of that, and then suggesting how we move forward is honest and it's helpful. The huge $8 million gap in our operating budget is indeed evidence of this collective oversight. Clearly, there is more to this budget than just transportation costs and healthcare. There's a quote by Albert Einstein that says, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." This highlights the idea that problems cannot be solved the same way that by the thinking that created them. Therefore, going forward, it's obvious we need a different model and mindset to operate from, and diligence adhere to the same. This should include, we cannot be everything to everybody, and that is okay. We are acting and spending like we are a big city. We are not. We cannot take on projects, expenditures, etc., that have unfavorable associated risk. We cannot expect anyone to come and save us. The state funding has decreased and will continue to do so because of said policies. We need to embrace our independence. It's not going to feel good, but we will feel good in the end. Vote no on the override. Thank you for your attention.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Jen Sandler, 26 Williston. Yeah, thanks for being here and for listening. And I am struck by the frustration of folks about how we got here. And I honestly don't know exactly how we got here. But a lot of things do make sense to me, which is like the notion that we can only increase our revenue by 2.5%, and that is not what inflation is, and we all know that. And so it makes sense that things have gotten out of whack. Why we only have a month to figure this out is problematic, right? And so there should be some accounting for that. And also, like, here we are, and I get that, and I think you get that. And I think so. I think that there is in the room, obviously, the room is evidence on all sides of a desire for a more democratic process for making decisions about our budget. And I think we could have a more democratic process. I think we could involve citizens more regularly in engagement with city budgets, with stating what their priorities are, with stating when there is scarcity, what do we want to cut, right? And what don't we want to cut? And everyone's going to have different ideas, and you're not going to resolve it in 3-minute, increments of, a water hose of. I mean, you're sitting here and listening, and I appreciate you listening. And this actually isn't what democracy looks like. Like, it's not. It's the best we've got, but it's not. It's not the best we can do. So I am hopeful that at the very least that this will lead to a more democratic discussion about what our values are and how we put our money where our mouth is. With respect to the override, we obviously need you, I think, to vote for us to have an override vote, because we should decide. You shouldn't decide, we should decide. And we do need a lot of information in order to make a good decision. This is not a great timeline for us to have a lot of information, and so that's problematic. And we got to do the best we can to educate as many of ourselves as possible about what it would mean to pass an override and what it would mean to not pass an override for real, for each of us. I don't understand why we can't pass a progressive tax. I don't understand why we have to flat tax everybody the same, because there are a lot of people in this city who can afford it. And the notion that we wouldn't pass an override and those people who can afford to save the really crucial services of this city is tragic in my view. We should have a chance to force the people who can afford it, and we should protect the people who can't afford it. And the fact that we can't figure that out is a problem. It shouldn't be this sort of voluntary charity thing. It is government's job to compel the people who can afford to pay it, and to also protect the folks who can't, who are on fixed income and who don't have the funds to scrape and do this. It's going to hurt everybody, but it'll decimate some people's budgets, and it'll just be like a real bummer for a lot of people. So it's okay for it to be a bummer.
Thank you. Next, also, I just want to remind folks, when you're speaking to the council, so don't look to the mayor or look to everyone else, right? You're talking to the council, right? So please state your name and address for the record.
Carl Prawl, Underline Farm, 15 Torrey. I didn't come prepared with pen or paper, so this is going to be scattered. I'm sorry for that. But I did hear Mayor Derby mention that we're going to turn over every rock, every stone, and look for cuts everywhere. I'm hoping we're going to do the same thing, looking for different sources of revenue. This is clearly a problem that's not going to solve itself. 2.5% increase every year, inflation the way it is, fuel the way it is, apparently gravel the way it is. Right? It's not, these numbers are not going to equal. So what is the city doing to pursue new lines of revenue? You know, new liquor licenses, great. Attracting developers, great. But that really takes a lot out of our control and has been repeated by others in the room. And I think we all know the state's not coming to save us. Washington, D.C. is not coming to save us. So I would really love it if, as we're going through this period, and I'm kind of happy I lost the election right now, so good luck, guys. I'd really love it if we're looking at more ways of getting revenue. I know for a fact that under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Williston is not due their property tax nullification. Like every year, the assessor has to go and look at that and decide if they're serving the public good or if they're actually serving a limited membership. And that's in Mass General Law. We could be looking at how we get our fiber optic back. Might cost us some money, but that's revenue. Why don't we do trash pickup in town? That's revenue. Why are we not looking at eminent domain on Eversource, who is gouging everyone in this room to control some funds? And not saying any of this is possible. I have no idea. It's shooting for the stars. But if we're looking for cuts everywhere, we need to be looking for revenue everywhere as well. And that might mean expanding local government. That might mean offering more services here in Easthampton and not turning to USA Trash, not turning to Republic, not turning to Eversource or National Grid or all of these corporate entities that Councilor Jamrock very well put out are just sapping us. They are parasites on this community, and until we build up the parallel systems, the alternates here in town, we're not going to get out from this, and we're just going to be facing the same situation next year or in 3 years or in 5 years or whenever it gets back there. We need to be able to control the cost of our lives. So please look under every rock and every stone, but let's find new revenue. Maybe it's speed traps. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for
Carolyn Cushing, Main Street, Precinct 4. And listening to everybody and hearing different opinions, the question before you tonight is to have an override or not to have an override. And it seems important to have the override and listen to people's voices, which you're doing tonight. And I'm kind of speaking to the pyramid, the grading idea. Because things are so late, we have one chance. And it's all or nothing, is what I am hearing. And I just, listening here, I Googled this, like South Hadley has a higher per capita than Easthampton even. So people with more means in South Hadley, and they couldn't pass things. I hear that there might be challenges with communicating it, but maybe we need to take on the communication challenge to have something rather than nothing. And this gets in, we will talk more about this, but the idea like 2.5, it doesn't meet inflation. There are factors beyond control. There are larger factors within the state, factors within the government, at the federal level. And I think people are tired, I'm tired, I'll say this, of being told to live within our means. People who are living within their means, who just want to have decent schools, while at the national level, there are tax cuts for billionaires. And we spend $1 billion a day on Iran, and you cannot fix these things only. You can set up the context for us to do the override and be in dialogue with each other. So, thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Hunter. I live at 8 Mayor Street, and I am on the school committee. I'm not speaking necessarily on behalf of the school committee. I'm asking the city council to please vote tonight to support the $6.9 million override special election on June 9th, which is the next step in this process. The reason I think it's really important to do that tonight specifically is because all of this needs to get out in the public. And we can't really do that until we have that step. So we won't know what cuts are going to look like until we know that this is the next step. So we've been waiting on this step to happen so that we can move ahead in kind of understanding and communicating more what various scenarios might look like. I will say, Prop 2.5 passed in 1982. We can't raise property taxes by more than 2.5%. Since 1982, and the rate of inflation since 1982 has been on average 3.5%. Just with the way that math works, this was going to end up happening at some point, and the fact that it's happening in so many communities right now, I think is a real testimony to just like how financially conservative and shrewd our small towns are. I'll just also say, when we're talking about low-income folks, this is definitely something that is going to affect some people more than others. But one of the things that also happens if you're living on a limited budget is you begin to lose services that you received before when the city can't pay for them. So, for example, we currently have full-day preschool. We finally have full-day preschool again in town. This is the number one issue I hear from parents. One of the number 2 or 3 that I hear from parents is that they want access to full-day preschool so they can go to work. And if this doesn't pass, we're not going to have full-day preschool anymore. So those families are going to have to either stop working or they're going to have to find other sources of childcare. And they're not going to be able to find sources of childcare that match the cost of them attending our full-day preschool. So the other thing is we offer a summer food program. We operate that at a slight loss to the district. Any child can go. There's no eligibility. You just show up. You get free food. It's a slight loss to our district, but we've always thought it was in keeping with our vision for the city and in keeping with what the priorities of the city were. We want kids to have access to food in the summer. Because we're operating it as a loss, we have to consider cutting it for next year if we don't pass the override. And that means that families who might have been spared an override will then have to find more room in their budget for groceries. So this is not a zero sum, like people are going to only pay more when there's an override. We're all going to pay more whether or not there is an override. So I'm asking you all to follow the process. Let us have this public conversation in public. And also, I'm trying to put information out online kind of as I get it and as it's available. So please feel free to talk to me about what would be helpful in that regard. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Dan Tadonic. I'm on the Board of Assessors, but I'm not representing the board tonight. I'm just speaking on my own behalf. I've seen a rough draft of the numbers, and it doesn't look good. I would encourage you, you've taken in a lot of information tonight. I would encourage you to put the question forward at 6.9, but if you don't feel that that's going to pass and that it's too much, offer a lower alternative. Because I personally feel some people would vote for a lower number that wouldn't vote for 6.9. And any question you put forward, if 50 Payson, we don't do our job and get the information out, no override is going to pass. If it's $100, if it's $1 million, if it's $7 million, it's not going to pass if the people don't know what is going to take place, what's going to get cut. And I think, I'm glad I'm on this side of the podium and not sitting there and having to make this decision. But I would request that you approve the 6.9. And if you feel that's too high, let the voters decide, but include another number, what you come up with as a number that's lower. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Derby. I know. Before we get to the folks online, just real quick, there were a couple of questions that folks had asked, just to provide some information. Why didn't we have a treasurer?
In the previous administration, there was some turnover in the finance department. There was some restructuring, and the last treasurer we had ended up having to leave for personal reasons. It was, I think that there was an effort to replace the treasurer. It just took a significant amount of time, which I think ended up being around 8 months.
Great. Just real quick, you mentioned this, why 6 to 8 liquor licenses? How does that impact?
Yeah, so, I mean, huge, we're not talking about bars. We're talking about the ability to capture more restaurants in the city. We do have a local option restaurant tax. So having more restaurants in the city drives more economic development, but it also drives more revenue. And we have limited sources locally to raise revenue. Restaurants are one of those places where we can raise revenue, and I know a lot of people that have opened restaurants and have restaurants, and unfortunately the markup on food is very small. And so in order to have a successful restaurant, you really need to have a liquor license to be able to allow people to drink with their meal.
Mm-hmm. And just real quick, we've touched on this a little bit, but why only a month to figure all this out?
Yeah, like I said before, this is in relation to the fact that free cash did not get certified until March. Again, that is related to the fact that we didn't have a treasurer for so long, that we had to hire a consultant to help us reconcile our books. And those books, when they got reconciled, that kind of starts the process of being able to certify free cash, which didn't get certified till March.
Great. Thank you very much.
Can I follow up on that?
Can we get to the people online and then?
Your call.
Let me go to the people online and then we'll come back. All right? All right? So we're going to go to people online. Thank you so much. So we're going to start with the folks online. Julie Slavitt, I see your hand is raised. Can you please state your name and address for the record? And you will have to unmute yourself. Julie, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Julie, we're going to come back to you. Liz Perry, please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record. Okay, now we have Julie.
Hi, hello, no, I'm here, sorry. Hi, I'm Liz Perry. I live in Ward 3. So I had one question and then one comment. And the question that I had was, why is it that the budgets are being cut by the size of the budget versus what is important to the community? It just seems like education is important. So let's not cut that one as much, even though it's the largest budget. And then my statement is, without the two budgets being presented to the city council, it feels weird that you're gonna be voting on this override now. I know that there is a deadline for it to be voted on for us to call the election in time without getting sued. But I would wait till the absolute deadline, which I think you have another week before the budgets are in front of you. Because as you were talking about confusing the public, the headlines tomorrow are gonna read, City Council voted for an override, which is going to give people the impression that you had the budget in front of you and it was an informed decision. I would like you to suspend this vote tonight and wait for the next week when you have the two budgets in front of you before you decide to call for an override. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, we have you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Julie Slavitt, 14 Nichols Way. I couldn't find where my unmute button was.
You're good.
So I have a few questions and a few comments. One of them is, I actually remember voting no on Proposition 2.5. It was the first time I voted. And Proposition 2.5 is a really stupid law to pass. And it's unbelievable that it's still in existence, honestly. Property taxes are also a really dumb way to support local government. You know, it's not equitable. It's not a good way to support local government, but that's sort of what we're stuck with. But one of the things to think about is that the value of our homes in Easthampton is directly related to the quality of the schools, the quality of our streets, the quality of our commercial district. So people should think about that. My husband and I are very privileged and live in a really wonderful condo that's at the high end. But we know that the schools and all the public services that we get in this town are directly related to us maintaining and improving that value. The other point I wanted to make is that it was difficult tonight. This stuff is really complicated, and it would have been very useful to have some slides. The mayor talked about having some infographics. I don't know why those weren't shared. Somebody mentioned communication, and communication needs to really improve because misinformation is, already out there about this. The other thing is that this is your override. The mayor can say it's not his override, city council can say it's not their override. This is your override. So it's really your job to sell this and in a way that explains it to people. I know that you can't tell people how to vote, but people really need to see the impact of this on residents. I think that's really important. A budget reflects the values of the community. Which is why the school budget is so big, such a big portion of the budget. I would just recommend a couple of things. One of them is that—
You have 30 seconds.
Hello?
You have 30 seconds.
All right, that a task force on impact be set up and that a task force on revenue be established. I don't know why we don't pay for parking in Easthampton. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Leslie Shar.
Thank you. I'm Leslie Shar. I live on Neshawanek Street. Some people will say, you rent, this doesn't affect you. Well, I'm telling you, and Nathan Marquis told you, it will affect all of us. My landlord isn't going to absorb the increased cost. And frankly, I'm surprised he hasn't raised the rent already. He's not in business to give away. His expenses have already risen. Fuel, utility, building maintenance, and materials have gone up. Now, my husband and I have basically been retired most of this century, and we thought we'd be comfortable, but nobody ever thought the cost of living would go up as high as it has. There are some weeks I'm at the food bank. We haven't gone out to eat or to any sort of event, unless you count the hospital and the doctor, as, a real long time. But between 2015 and 2025, we had an average inflation rate of 3% a year. Now, some people will say, well, 3% and we can only raise 2.5, we shouldn't be that far out of whack. But that's the consumer price index. That is not the cost that government things pay. It doesn't include the cost of salaries, educational material, health insurance, workers' comp, gravel, the cost of blacktop. With supply chain issues and some corporations making outrageous profit, there's no way the city could keep up with only 2.5% a year. But now we find the city is short by a lot. And it's not that we've been poorly managed. but I will admit there have been a couple of harebrained commitments made, especially using those COVID relief funds on permanent positions. But that's in the past. We can't go back and undo them. We can sit here all night and say that was a bad decision and so is to blame for it. But that's not going to get us where we are today. There's no sense in blaming the select board when most of them haven't even been there more than, I'd say 6 years. I mean, I can see 3 who've been there that longer than that. I know that things are going to have to be cut back. I just hope it's not too far. Fire and EMS already run at skeleton levels. A couple of weeks ago, we needed mutual aid from Southampton, Northampton, and Barnes. And then next week, we had a fire at one of the mill buildings. Can you imagine if our fire department were not as well trained and well equipped as they were, to find that fire before it spread? We'd really be out of luck then if our mills went up.
Leslie, your time is up.
Okay.
Do you want to finish that thought, or, okay?
Well, I was just going to say, don't cut the library, because if you cut the library, you won't be able to use the public library anywhere in the state.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie. Sean, you're up next. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sean Abbott, Summer Street. So I just wanted to, have folks acknowledge that this is, in fact, larger forces out of control. I appreciate Councillor Demar McQuaid mentioning that. This is, an outlie of Trump stealing from the citizens of Massachusetts and the citizens of Easthampton, and federal money that gets pulled from the state budget also gets pulled from city budgets. And that's on top of, as previous speakers pointed out, a really bad decision back in the 80s to limit the amount of increases we could have to fund our cities at a rate that is well below inflation. So nothing was ever going to keep up. So that's obvious. So obviously I support being able to do the override to try and correct some of those decisions from the past, not the decisions made by the city, but rather the decisions made to limit the amount that cities could adjust their budgets and the flexibility that they had. I, for one, wish that we could go for the full override that we need, the full 8.5 or whatever that was being mentioned earlier. And I understand that may not be politically feasible. And I also understand that there's a lot of folks that this is going to be very difficult to deal with. But it's going to be very difficult to deal with no matter which way we go. Service cuts are also difficult to deal with, even if folks don't want to admit that sort of thing. But we really need to be able to cover the budget to have stability, to get us through to some possibility of not having Trump in charge anymore, because that's the point at which, maybe we'll get some stability in the country again, and maybe we'll stop dealing with these, insane, random things happening to us, the tariffs, the wars, all the other stuff that's happening. But I also want to support the person who spoke earlier that said that we need to find new ways of raising revenue. And I want to point out that there are other things that we can do that we're already working on. For instance, Councillor Jamrock McQuaid's zoning ordinance updates. Infill is infinitely more cost-effective than building out new neighborhoods, because you're already using your existing infrastructure. So it doesn't really cost you much more, but it does raise more property taxes for you. So it is the city centers, the dense areas, tend to support tax-wise the rest of the city. That's almost certainly true in Easthampton, although I haven't been able to verify that yet. But it's true almost everywhere. To go along with the being able to do things like zoning updates and finding other revenue, because finding revenue is very important. We could even go a little bit more exotic. We could look at things like a land tax instead of a property tax, because really when you get right down to it, a land tax is a much more efficient way of taxing the amount of support that any given property needs compared to, in terms of the percentage of budget that any given particular property takes up. And then the last thing I wanted to briefly touch on was I do think that we should do a lot of communication, and I hope that both this body and everybody who works for the city will go ahead and embrace their expertise and let people know what's going on and help us figure out what we should be doing. One of the things that has always been
Sean, your time is up.
Is the people that we hire to be experts.
Sean, your time is up. Please finish your thought.
To do that.
Good. Thank you so much. Leslie Button, you are up.
Leslie Button, 5 Fox Run, Easthampton, Massachusetts. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. So I'm going to say, first of all, that I have a lot of experience managing budgets at a significant level. No, not a $65 million level, but a significant level. And one of the things that I had to do as part of preparing a budget for the future is tax on anticipated costs increased costs of doing business for certain materials for like a 3-year period of time. So here's my, I guess it's I don't know if it's a question or suggestion. I was able to find the FY26 budget on the government website, City of Easthampton website. But in terms of transparency, what is sort of lacking for me as a resident is there's the Proposition 2.5% level funding increase, which I understand. But what are the contractual costs of increase for other things? So for example, if there's a contract with healthcare insurers for increased costs for employees, what is that level? What is the level of increases for the contract with the Teachers Association, for example, and so forth and so on? You get my idea, I think. I think that is one of the pieces for me that is missing. It is, here we are, the next fiscal year is set to be in like two months. And it's not just what we're facing in 2027, but what's beyond that. And how can City Council and others to make that more transparent to people? And I know it's an incredible amount of work, and I appreciate everything everybody has done. But I think that's one of the missing pieces for people is how did we get here? And how do we anticipate that for the future? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Mayor Derby, there's a couple questions, if you don't mind just answering them. I think they've been discussed, but, and then I want to make sure that Councilor Kwasinski has his follow-up question. Why is the budget being cut proportionally?
So it's about equity and fairness. The largest component of the budget, I mean, as we look across the city, in order to be fair, needs to absorb the largest impact if we're looking at cuts, because smaller departments would not be able, I met with some departments today that are 2 people. That's a significant difference than a department that has hundreds of people. And so you can't really spread out the impact across a 2-person department in the same way you can across a department that has dozens and dozens of people. So it's just about fairness.
Mm-hmm. Why can't we wait another week?
I think.
Hang on just one second, we're gonna find that, there it is.
Yeah, there you go. So waiting another week, I think, puts us very close to the deadline. I think that with this timeline that we're on, well, it's tight. Another week doesn't really change that. It's still tight. And, while we originally were on a different timeline, which was much tighter than this timeline. So, I feel comfortable enough with looking at the June 9 date for the election to be able to have this amount of time to be able to give people the information that they need. Obviously, this was not something that we planned to do. This was not something we wanted to do. And honestly, we knew that we probably were going to have to do this. I talked about it at the Senior Center Building Committee weeks ago when I said, we knew that there was a deficit that we thought we could plug for this year. And then we were going to have to plan potentially for an override next year, and we would have a whole year. That was the timeline I wanted. this timeline is not ideal, but it's the timeline that we have, and that, we're going to have to work with what we have.
Great. And I think, this was a question, but really, I think it's more just a statement. So you don't need to respond to this,
Okay.
and then I'll turn it over to Councilor Kwasinski. But I think someone said, can we improve communication? And I think that that's something that this council needs to do, and I think anyone working on this override, if we pass it this evening, we really need to do what we can to improve that. So I appreciate you answering those questions, but Councilor Kwasinski, you had a follow-up.
Well, just to make things clear, I think for everybody, everyone seemed to have or rather many people had the question, why such a short time frame? And we hear the reason from the past. Well, we didn't have a treasurer, we didn't have the information, but why, people need to understand why only 6 weeks now, why not 2 months, 3 months, so that we can time this out, have folks consider it, be part of a process, be transparent, be open. And I think the answer is all because of the budget that's coming out, but we need to hear that from you.
So there's two answers, and I'll say the first one because we've already talked about this. Schools have a statutory deadline to notify teachers at the end of the school year if they are going to be returning. That deadline is June 15th. Originally, we thought it was June 1st. Thankfully, it's June 15th. With the June 1st timeline, that would have put us at the override at May 26th. That would have been, like I said earlier, a very short timeline. So that's one of the pieces. The other piece is the city budget does need to be passed before July 1st. So, we need to have a balanced budget, state law. And so that's one of the reasons, those are the two reasons why now this timeline is where it is. And can I, is it possible to there was a question that was asked and I wanted to address it. It was about cannabis establishments. And I think a lot of people, rightfully so, when those came into the city, one of the things that happened was there was a host community agreement, and there was also a community impact agreement. So those two things cost the dispensaries a significant amount of money that they paid to the city. That money is completely gone. I did not get to see any of that money when I became interim mayor. That money was spent. We do still, however, bring in a local option excise tax. And I will say that local option excise tax is, and I don't have the exact number, but I do know that it's in the $300,000 range. So that's what we're getting. It's not the big money that was originally, which ended up being, we had a cannabis mitigation impact fund, I believe we called it. And we funded, an ambulance, we funded road improvements and flashers at crosswalks and, but that money was spent. And so really now all we have is the local option tax.
Great, thank you for answering that question. So as a process, I think what we need to do is we need to decide whether or not we want to move forward with this option. So I think what we have to do is I need to receive a motion, and then we need to have a conversation about whether or not there's going to be amendments to that particular motion. I think that's just going to be the cleanest opportunity for us to kind of move forward. But Councilor Peak, do you have your hand up?
Prepared to make that one.
Okay, great. So I think that's going to be easiest for us to then begin to engage in this dialogue about, do we have this or not have this? So Councilor Peak, would you like to make a motion?
All right, I would make a motion that the City Council sub special election for June 9th, 2026 to vote on a proposed tax levy override of $6,900,000.
Second. So we have a motion and a second to set a special election for Tuesday, June 9th to discuss the proposed tax levy override. No, go ahead.
That's not what I heard.
What did I say?
I
say things wrong all the time. But,
we weren't discussing anything. We were setting instructing the clerk to schedule a special
But that's
election.
that's the motion, so what would be really helpful is if we read the actual.
Oh, yeah, I'll do the actual thing.
Yeah, do the actual.
Okay, it's,
In accordance.
this one, okay, yep. I'll do it again, better. I retract my previous motion.
I retract my second.
Okay.
Retracted second, retracted motion,
right.
motion, so please move forward.
I will make a motion that in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Part 1, Title, I don't know my. Nine. Chapter 59, Section 21CG, I hereby call on the East Hampton.
Okay, so city council hereby.
Yeah, the city, I think it was the city council accept the following language for an override of Proposition 2.5. The question submitted to the voter shall be worded as follow, and that the city council instruct the city clerk to schedule the special election with said language on Tuesday, June 9th. The question submitted to the voters shall be worded as follows. Shall the city of Easthampton be allowed to assess an additional $6,900,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of operating the municipal government and public schools for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026? Yes or no?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Part 1, Title 9, Chapter 59, Section 21CG, that the city council will set a special election with the aforementioned language to be set for Tuesday, June 9th. Any further discussion?
Well, I think the question was, does this become the only item on the special election?
So would you like to make an amendment?
Well, I thought we would perhaps have some discussion, but I'd be happy to make an amendment.
I think that's what we're doing, so.
I would be happy to suggest an amendment to this.
Great.
And that is to add an additional question to the ballot where the voters would be asked, shall the city of Easthampton be allowed to assess an additional $3,450,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of operating the municipal government and public schools for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026, yes or no?
Okay. So we.
Is there a second
Well, that's.
to the amendment?
Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to add a second question. Shall the city of Easthampton be allowed to assess an additional $3,450,000 in real estate and personal property for the purposes of operating the municipal government and public schools for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026? Yes or no? Any further discussion? Councilor Peak.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing something like this, but do you mind if I inquire as to where that number came from?
Councilor Kuzinski, would you like to respond?
The number came from being closer in line to the amount of money that we were digging out of our reserves and stabilization in the past fiscal budget. So this is a little less than that amount. It's 1/2 of the amount. It's 1/2 of the pain for the citizens who would vote yes to this measure as opposed to the 6.9. It's a stopgap measure. It's hoped that it will carry us for a year or two and get us through the current process. It's also derived from looking at the override questions from other communities. Most communities opted for a two-tiered system where they had one figure and a second figure. That second figure received far more votes than the first figure. I think we need to give this city every chance possible to move forward, and our citizens the right to move forward with options. They could decide 6.9 is the number. They could decide 3.45 is the number. They could decide 0 is the number. But this gives our folks options.
Councilor Marquis.
I agree, thank you, Madam President. I agree with Councilor Peak's original assessment. I believe that this will add too much confusion. I believe that people will be thinking they're voting for 6.9 million and then 3.45 million. I think it's too much confusion. I think a lot of the reasons that some of them may be less informed voters that which we were in charge of communicating. I think that they'll be confused, and I would be more in favor if it were possible down the road having another special election rather than having 2 ballot questions, unless it was a either or, like a bubble choice where it could be yes on this, yes on, and you could only fill in one. There would be 3 options, unless it was designed like that.
Thank you. I saw your hand, Councilor Newton.
Yeah, I would propose 3.9. But the other thing I wanted to ask about was, I know we have ranked choice voting in Easthampton. Is it possible, and you probably know the answer, Tom, for this to be a ranked choice question so that people, and I'm guessing it's probably no, but I just want to make sure.
Councilor Peak, would you like to answer that question? Just because I know you love ranked choice voting. I can answer it, but I'm going to give you that.
Yeah, no, our charter authorizes that for the election of certain officials, but we don't have anything authorizing that for ballot questions. But it's a great question.
I also heard you propose 3.9, but we're in another motion, so we're not doing that, right? So we already have an amendment on the floor. Councilor Peak and then Councilor Jamrock McQuaid.
Yeah, I just want to, since Councilor Marquis made my point, I just want to make sure that I'm accurately representing my position on this. I'm not in theory opposed to the inclusion of a second number, but if there's a second number, I do think that there's a cost and a benefit to it. There's trade-offs. I think that the advantage is it gives us a little bit of insurance if the first number falls a little bit short, that maybe the second, the lower number, maybe that's okay. And, you know, that could be a non-trivial, that can make a difference for a lot of services in the situation where we don't get enough support for the full number. So I'm not inherently opposed to this. I just think that if we are doing it, there needs to be a full understanding, because we are the people who are putting this on the ballot, right? Like, people are going to be coming to us for answers on these things. There needs to be a very full understanding from all of our municipal leadership that there's going to be, in this very short timeline, an additional burden to educate people, to make sure that they understand that the way that these pyramid things work, if both pass, only the bigger number goes into effect, because you're going to see people who either genuinely don't understand this or understand it perfectly well and are just not acting in good faith, who are going to say that so we put 3.45 on there. They're going to say, oh, well, this is actually an $11 million override because they're asking for 3.45 and they're also asking for 6.9. So it's just, I'm not saying that I couldn't be talked into supporting something like this. This was a concern that I have heard, that I've seen played out in other communities. And if that's what makes my colleagues most comfortable, I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure we understand the costs and benefits before we sign on to something like that.
Madam President, may I?
Councilor.
I just have an information question.
I'll allow it. Councilor Kwasinski.
I have an information question for the clerk that'll help, I think, understand some of this, and that is the cost of a municipal election.
Yes, it's approximately 16,000, 15 to 16,000. That's programming of machines, printing of ballots, which we have to pay.
So I'm not sure everybody heard that.
It's approximately 15 to 16,000. It's just about 10,000 for the election workers during the day. And then I generally don't get paid. I can take time off if I have extra hours I put in, but it's, the main crux of it is the election workers are about 10,000 for the day. And then we're required to have certain number of election workers by state law. And then there's programming of the machines. We have the regular machines that most people are used to using. There is an auto mark for people who need assistance marking their ballot. That's just about 1,000 just to program that. And then printing of the ballots.
Just to point out the cost of doing this, I would love to be able to say, let's do it for one and then do it for another, but I think there's reason to consolidate.
Thank you for that. And you're very much appreciated, Marianne. Councilor Jamrock McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam President. I think what's sort of troubling and tricky for me about adding in another number is just, I think that while cutting the number in half would be like half the pain for the taxpayer, I don't know if it would necessarily be half the pain for the city. Like, I think that it's a little simplistic to think about budgets in that way where like, it's possible to just make half the cuts and it'll be the same, it'll be half the impact. I think that we've learned that when you start making cuts, you start having to pay for unemployment benefits, you start losing kids to choice out to other districts. And it's hard for us without the two budgets in front of us to understand what that means. Like, what am I giving up if I'm giving, or if I'm, if I'm going to the ballot, what am I giving up? I'm sure it would be clear by then, but it just, for me, it seems like when we're weighing these options, it's really hard to know. It just feels like we're throwing spaghetti at a wall. And I hate that feeling, but I also know that the 6.9 number has been toiled over by the finance team for a long time, who have been looking at these numbers that I don't have access to. So I guess I would defer to the other members on the council that have been privy to those conversations to sort of get a sense of the feasibility of that. And then I would urge everyone that we should just be really intentional about that number. And I don't think that we should just cut it in half. I think that we should have a fulsome discussion about what it means.
Councilor Peak?
Yeah, to that point, there's a question that I think perhaps only the mayor can answer, but if we were to go with a second lower number for the budget process, would that then require us to consider 3 budgets, one with the full amount, one with the intermediate amount, and one with the lower amount? That is my understanding, and they are nodding. So
Actually, hang on a second. Mayor Derby, can you, for the people who can't see you nodding, can you just speak to that?
I am nodding.
Okay.
Yes, it would, and that, like I said, I just met with half of the departments today, meeting with the other half tomorrow to go over the second part of the budget. So that means we'd have to meet with all of the departments again for a third round of, adjustments. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Councilor Peak, do you want to finish your thought?
Sure, yeah, I just, look, it's a stressful time for everyone, and if that's something that we really decide we want to do, then I don't imagine the department heads will be thrilled, but it is what it is. But I just think that, in terms of a budget process that we are going through, which is going to involve a lot of, I hope, voter education and voter participation. Again, I'm not against this. I can be talked into it. I do want to just point out that I think there is a little bit of a liability for information overload when you're, 2 budgets, one thing, 3 budgets, we'll do it. We'll get it done. It's just, I don't want us to take a vote on this and then suddenly be like, oh, wait, that's what that means? Like, that's a whole headache. So I just want to just point it out. That's all.
Other discussion, Councilor Schmidt.
Yeah, I do have a quick clarifying question. I don't know if anybody here could answer this for me, but let's say we did have the 2 questions on a ballot and one of them clearly had more people vote in favor of it than the other, is that all we're looking at? Or if the other question had more than 51% of the vote, would that one be passing? I just wanted to clarify that for myself and others.
Councilor Peak?
Sure. If the larger number receives 50% plus one of the votes, if it receives a majority of the votes, it passes. Even if the other one gets 90% and that one gets 51%, the bigger one passes. If the bigger dollar amount, yeah. If the bigger dollar amount fails, but the lower dollar amount does receive a majority, then and only then would that be the number that passes.
You have a follow-up question, Councilor Schmidt?
I have a different question.
Okay.
I appreciate that clarification. I think that's really useful for us to consider. I also just wanted to sort of echo the sentiment of some of my colleagues here. I do have some trepidation about further confusing an already complicated matter, and I do want to sort of recognize and give my respect to the conversations that have been had by the budget task force, that they came up with that number as the best option that they wanted to recommend, and I'm hesitant to come up with just a number right this second. That being said, I believe somebody mentioned earlier, sort of increasing the likelihood of getting something out of this if we have a lower option. People are almost always going to vote, I think, more for the lower option, right? But I fear that with these two options, we're not actually giving the complete picture, and this may be an additional amendment that you would want me to bring to the table, but I would actually, if we're going to be adding to this, I think I would like to see that the actual number that we need for sort of solvency moving forward is also included in that budget, so that we're not seeing the 6.9 and saying, oh, that's the most that we need. We're actually creating, the full picture for folks. That being said, if I may just put one more thing forward and kind of get on my own soapbox for a second here, we often think about communication as we just need to get the message out to people, right? But communication is far more complicated than that. Communication includes a sender of a message, a receiver of a message, the message itself, and the noise that gets in the way of that message. And so, thinking about the people who are going to be, most impacted by this, they may not be paying attention to the information that we are putting out there because they're paying attention to making their ends meet. And I'm not sure that there's anything, I want to see that the council and that the city does its due diligence to put information out there, but I just wanted to also make it clear that sometimes, because communication is a two-way street, there's only so much you can do to get a message out there, and there's still going to be places where your message does not reach the receiver. And so in those instances, I think simplicity is going to work in our favor. And so I just wanted to add that to the conversation that we're having here. Again, I just feel like we oversimplify communication, and the reality is there will be people who may be reading the question for the first time at the ballot box, and that's the reality of it.
Great, thank you. I saw some hands going this direction. No? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to, I'll just read it again. Shall the city of Easthampton be allowed to assess an additional $3,450,000 in real estate and property taxes for the purpose of operating the municipal government and public schools for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026.
I just wanted to put on record, I'm amenable to Councilor Newton's suggestion. I'm amenable to any other second number.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was further thought about that for the rationale, that's fine. I'm not tied to the 3.45.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Peak. I almost said mayor, but I held back.
Good job.
So, yeah, I think that I'm not sure that I'm in on this number. I'm open to the idea of another number, but I think I would like to if we're gonna do that, to use a number that has sort of a rationale of saying, this is the number, like for instance, what it could be is to say, this is the number if we use the remaining reserves that we can use without damaging our bond rating. This is the minimum number we would have to be good for just this year, and that would still leave us in a really bad spot going forward, but at least like there's some rationale to that number being tied to something, and I think, Councilor Newton, that's what you were suggesting.
Do you want to speak to that, Councilor Newton?
Yeah, so I was suggesting the 3.9. Is it possible to ask Evan a question, or is that not possible?
Evan LeBeau, would you?
I think that you are maybe the numbers guy at the moment.
Okay.
If it's possible.
Can you please state your name and role for the city?
Sure, Evan Lepo, Assistant to the Mayor.
Okay, so I'm looking at your copy that
yes.
is looking at the proposed 2027, what was originally proposed by the departments, and then the reduced. And I know that the mayor has said that this is not final.
Correct.
Right? However, I have also looked through it a little bit and seen that like the school department, their 2.7 is already put in there, even though they haven't divvied up how they're gonna do that. So it looks like you have gone through and you have like reduced the budget by what you would like. And it looks to be just over or just under 3.9 for the reduced versus the proposed. So do you think it's possible that the 3.9 would cover us for next year alone? And the mayor can answer too.
So I would definitely like to err to the mayor on that. I would just like to say, yes, that's beyond my pay scale for sure. But what I would like to say is that file you're looking at, that is a work in progress. I'm sure a lot of people are having a lot of questions about what this Excel file is, but this is what we've been referencing with department heads through these meetings this week. This is also, my personal notes, as it is for many of you. This is also my first time going through a municipal budget process. I'm learning this along with a lot of you. But so some of that stuff, it might seem all over the place, but that's because that's mine. We just wanted a copy to share with you that was mostly up to date as of last week.
Great, thank you.
Yes, but let me.
Mayor Derby, would you like to respond?
Yeah. So we do have multiple operating budgets, so that just happens to be Evan's that he shared. So I would just remind that 3.9 million is this small gap that we have right now that does not take into account the increases that we're expecting to see. So that small 3.9, using 2 million of stabilization, is going to grow to 7.9 by the end of next fiscal year. And let me just get the numbers right. So I know this because we've done the projections. It's, again, I have to say it compounds. In 28, 9.5 million. So that if we don't pass an override, and if we pass a small one, there will be a difference between those two. And then by 2029, it's 15.1 million. That's if there's no override. Because those costs are costs that are going to, we've extrapolated what we've seen now as percentage increases, and we've extrapolated those across 5 years. And without, a significant input to balance the financial footing, those are going to continue to grow. But with an override at 6.9, that is going to allow us to make cuts, to be able to change the trajectory to offset those increases into the future and minimize those. With a $3 million, we're going to be back. So just want to make that really clear.
Follow-up question, Councilor?
Yeah, so I totally understand what you're saying, and I totally get that the 6.9 would put us in a really good place. I'm asking for just next year. Would 3.9 allow us to survive just next year if we were to do a second ballot question?
So-
Because it's either 6.9 or nothing, right? And if we were to get nothing, would 3.9
I mean,
make us safe for next year?
3.9 would be helpful in some respect because it would stave off some of the cuts, but there's still going to have to be significant cuts to offset the compounding piece of this, that this is going to continue to grow, right? So if we no, I just want to be like really clear. Last year, it was $4 million out of stabilization to fill the budget deficit. Then I think it was somewhere in the $280,000 range. Tom, maybe you can remember more effectively than I can, from tax rate stabilization. And then there was, I think there was one other line that was one-time funds that got put towards balancing the budget last year. So that ended up being more like 4.5 million of one-time funds used to balance the budget, which is why, and you can see it now, where we are with potentially needing significantly more than that. It compounds year after year. So last year it was like 4.5 million to plug that hole. Next year it will be significantly more. So if we only get 3.9, there's still going to be a very big gap.
Counselor, who had their hand up first? Counselor Kwasinski.
I think what we're looking at is, Mr. Mayor, is a question of not filling the gap, but what cuts would be required at a figure of 3.9 in order to balance the budget, as opposed to the cuts that would be required at 0?
I mean, it would be 3.9 million more cuts. But
I guess what I'm really asking is, are we talking about cuts or using stabilization monies, reserves to balance the budget? Because I think the time has come for us to bite the bullet.
So I would say,
I don't think we dip into our reserves or our stabilization at this point.
and if we're using good fiscal policy, we're going to try to avoid using our stabilization fund for a couple of reasons. One is it's, using those funds reduces our capacity to fund emergency things, which happen. I'll remind everybody of the generator at Public Safety this summer that, ended up being offline for, I think, close to 3 weeks. We had to bring in a portable generator, which was extremely expensive, right? So those types of things happen within cities, especially with aging infrastructure. I think the other thing to consider is, as we look at these cuts, beyond preserving our stabilization, which I think is important, there are ripple effects that happen. So if these cuts happen to the schools, that's going to have a ripple effect to people's property values. Now, some people appreciate that, and some people are like, well, I'm not planning on selling my house, so it doesn't really matter. But it does mean something. It does affect property values. And generally, it's considered to be like a 2 to 6% decrease in property values based on like the performance of your school. So that's one thing. There's the other thing. It's called the I believe it's IPO, which is the insurance rating that our public safety, which by the way we were at. So 10 is the worst, 1 is the best. We were at a 5 for years. Last year we got upgraded to a 3. You might ask, why am I bringing this up? Well, it has a significant direct impact to the price you pay for homeowners insurance. So every number that changes, it impacts your property insurance, your homeowners insurance pretty significantly. So, we might think, well, just cut it. Like, who's going to end up paying for that? Like, I don't want to pay for it. One way or another, there's going to be, someone's going to pay, right? And whether it's with higher homeowners insurance, if we make the cuts, or whether it's a loss of property value, if we make the cuts, or if it's the cost of passing an override. I mean, I think that these are the questions that we have to weigh, and these are the hard questions that I think are important to be grappling with right now, because again, there's no perfect number. But there is a number that is going to get us to a place where we can kind of find stability and keep things somewhat normal.
Thank you, Mayor Derby. Councillor Peak.
This is more to my colleagues, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that when we're talking about the 6.9, we're clear about what we're talking about here. And when we're talking about something like a 3.9, that we're clear what we're talking about here. Which again, is not saying that, like, I think that there's an obvious case for adding a lower number just in case the higher number doesn't work. But just so it's clear, if a $6.9 million override passes, that does not mean that Easthampton is in a really great place fiscally. We are still going to need to make substantial cuts. We are going to have to figure out ways to realize some long-term savings. We are going to have to realize some ways to bring in some new revenues, and we're going to have to pray that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts decides that maybe they should find some ways, given that they're the ones imposing a lot of restrictions on what sort of revenues we can actually raise, that they maybe are going to help us out a little bit. That's what, but like, we're not, like, a $6.9 million override still means cuts, and it still means that maybe that gives us a couple of years before we either have to figure out some big structural stuff, or we're back in a pretty bad situation. So I just want to be clear about that. Like, the actual number that we'd want to look for a long-term, like long-term viability was 8.5. We felt that that number was likely not politically realistic. So this is already a pared down number. Now, obviously, would having 3.9 be better than having nothing? Yes, like, that's $3.9 million of less cuts that you need to make, sort of. It doesn't actually perfectly work out that way, because every cut that you make, you only realize maybe 60 cents on that savings. But, you know, it's something instead of nothing. And I'm not opposed to having something instead of nothing. But I want to make sure that we understand, if we're going to do this, and that we're prepared to communicate to voters that a $3.9 million override, what that really probably realistically means for the city is that if we draw down our reserves to the minimum level that we realistically can do without affecting our credit rating, that we can probably get 1 year and then have to go back to the voters again, unless there's a massive deflationary period or substantial state or federal relief. That's what we're talking about here, is saying, do we, like, if you vote for that, you're not voting that and saying, all right, well, that's enough, they'll figure it. Like, that is not enough. 6.9 is enough that maybe we can figure it out for 3 years. 3.9 is maybe enough that we could figure it out maybe for 1 year if we draw down all of the money we saved up over COVID for rainy day, and also leave us in a very, very vulnerable situation. And I just want to make sure that we understand that that's realistically, if we give that to people as an option, I'm okay with that. I know I'm repeating myself here, it's getting late, because something's better than nothing, and I get that, but I don't want it to end up in a situation where we're talking about it like, oh, 6.9 is, we're good if we get 6.9, but 3.9, we'll figure something out. That's not where we are. 3.9, we are deeply screwed as a city. 6.9, we are still somewhat screwed as a city, but we have some options for how we figure that. We at least get a couple of years to maybe figure out a way there, or get some lucky breaks where the Commonwealth decides to help out, or inflation slows down because we lurch into a global recession or something. Like, that's what we're actually talking about for this situation. So, yeah.
Great. So we have a motion and a second, unless someone would like to say something, which is Councillor Jamrock McQuaid.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for clarification, and then maybe a proposal or a potential way forward. So throughout this process, I've heard it said that if we pass the override vote, if the override vote passes at the ballot in June, we don't necessarily have to raise the full levy capacity. So my question is that correct? And also, what is the timeline for when that has to be decided?
Counselor Peak?
Yes, that is correct. It's something that I think we want to be a little bit cautious about how we message it because I think it can be confusing. But yeah, the override authorizes us to raise up to this. Any given year, we could just decide to raise, less than what we're totally allowed to do. There's reasons why that's probably not sound fiscal management in this current legal structure that we have. But it's true that like, if we got the full override and then something very fortuitous happened, like we would have, suddenly the state is like, hey, we're doubling UGGA. Okay, great, we could just.
And would we?
Check your temperature.
Yeah.
Would we have until the end of June to make that decision? Is that tied to the budget itself, or is that tied to another decision?
I think that decision would actually come into place in the fall, but that part of the tax rate. That's part of the tax rate recap, which I believe happens in October.
Okay. So I guess.
Counselor Shamrock?
Yeah. So I guess just for my own comfortability, this is sort of where my brain has gone. Because I think through the budget process, the city council and the public will have a lot more information in front of us to like look at what this actually looks like, what these cuts could look like. And I think that we as a council have the power to make those cuts on a line-by-line basis. And I think that if we, personally, I feel like I would feel a lot more comfortable taking the approach of asking or putting the vote to the 6.9 and then going in during the budget process and proposing additional cuts to say, we don't agree with this, we think that we can lower this, and then make that sort of how we're paring down that number potentially. Just because without the numbers in front of us, we only have the information that the mayor mentioned and what the budget task force has done. And that just doesn't feel like I have it doesn't feel like I've been given the opportunity to do the due diligence that I need to. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think city council is challenged by, we're dealing with numbers that feel really nebulous. Like we have nothing concrete. We are being told, and there's no reason for me not to want to believe, right? But we are kind of dealing with numbers that, yes, other people have looked at them. Yes, people have had conversations, but for the rest of us, in order to be able to make a sound decision, like maybe we haven't seen that, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to me to go with this particular number because it's not clear to me, right? Councilor Peak?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that some of that is just the unfortunate situation of the timeline and when we found this information and the recalibrations that have to go in. I want to make it clear when I say things like this, especially in this context, I want to be really careful about how I'm saying this, that I don't think that anyone did anything improper. This just landed the way that it did. But one reality of it is that so we're talking about 6.9 right now, it could be that we find $300,000 of cuts that we feel comfortable making in the budget process, and then, what that number would look like would be different. But it's just an unfortunate thing that we have to decide on a number now because it needs to happen before the end of the fiscal year. And I don't know if this works differently in other, because I even when all of our financial operations were completely on time, we were still starting a budget process in April, so I don't know that there's how much better we could make it, but I do think that that's something, it's not ideal, but the reality is we need to set a number and then we get a shot at the actual budget, which would theoretically change that number, so it's tricky.
Mm-hmm. Other discussion? So we have a motion and a second on the amendment. Councilor or Vice President Jadzik.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the discussion. This is not an easy decision overall for this particular amendment, any of it. And I guess I just wanted to share a quick thought. And so I think similar to my colleague, Councilor Peak, I would probably prefer one number, but I'm happy to support options because I heard loud and clear tonight from the public especially that options are something that people are amenable to. One of my concerns with having an option, and this is not necessarily a question or even a statement, but just a concern I'm putting out there is, and I guess maybe more for the public than anyone else, is I am concerned that if we were to put this option of a lower number, it passes, we have to come back for more money. I'm really, really concerned what that looks like for us as a community next year, because the amount of stress and frustration and fear and anger that we are experiencing right now, and we are barely into it at this point. We have another month ahead of us. It's going to get a lot more intense, but I just cannot even imagine what that will look and feel like when we come back next year with a lower number. So that is my main concern that's making me sweat a little bit beyond the air not being on right now. And I just wanted to put that out there, really, again, mainly for the public, because I just want people to really understand this, that if we go forward with this amendment, we give you options, which again, I think is a good thing to have, to be really, really clear about what that means and to not be shocked if we go down that pathway, because it will have to be the next step in the process, because we're not going to figure this out in a year. It's just impossible to do that.
And we're certainly not going to figure it out tonight, right? I see some hands. Who was first? Councilor Newton.
I really appreciate what everyone has said, and it makes me feel comfortable with doing one number.
Councilor Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to express my appreciation for that point. I think it's a really salient point. And I think one of the things we've also heard from folks tonight is a desire for fiscal responsibility from the city side. And I feel like giving people the impression that the lower number is going to fix things long-term, whether or not that's our intention of what we're trying to communicate here, but to then come back, I don't think exhibits financial responsibility, and I don't think would be viewed that way. And I think for that reason, I'm further given pause to kind of request that smaller amount.
Councilor Marquis.
From my understanding, 6.9 is the lower number, and I'm not really comfortable with voting for any amendments that fall below 6.9 at this moment.
So again, we have a motion and a second on the table for an additional 3,450,000. Any further discussion? So all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah,
Two. Opposed?
Aye. Or no?
No.
We don't do a lot of that.
Any abstentions? Motion fails. Any further amendments to add or to the main motion? Saying none. All right, so we have, back to the original, so we have the main motion of shall the city of Easthampton be allowed to assess an additional $6,900,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of operating for municipal government and public schools for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2026, yes or no? Any further discussion? Councilor Peak.
I know everyone's getting really sick of hearing my voice. I know I am.
That's why you're mayor. I'm kidding.
Okay. Yeah. So there's just a couple things I just wanted to, because just that I've reacted to through this process that I just want to point out before we take a vote. So the first thing I just want to say is that, like, the way that the city has just. I think that there's two important things that when we're talking about this with our constituents, we need to understand as being different. And one of them is the way that the city has, over the last few years, taken in and managed financial information so that they can make decisions in a timely and responsible manner. The other issue is the fact that 2.5% revenue upgrades are not going to keep up through 6 years of supply side inflation. These are two different issues. The first issue sucks and it's not acceptable and there's a lot of blame to go around, and I think that I will take a good chunk of that myself as finance chair for seeing some of these things that were behind and saying, okay, well, they're getting caught up and not pushing and not being maybe like a little bit more like, what can we do to help, make sure that these processes get every little bit of support they need to get caught up and things like that. Or there's certain things I saw that I probably should have said something and I didn't. So I own that 100%, and I think there's a lot of other people here who could say that they have a thing like that. That is a thing. It's not good. We need to fix it. There are currently things that are being done to fix it, and it's on every one of us to make sure that it gets fixed, and that's also not why we are here. We are here because year over year, we have passed budgets that preserve the level of services that we saw, that we had the year before, while simultaneously the cost of providing those services increased massively due to many issues that are not entirely under our control. And that doesn't mean that there's not things that we spent money on that maybe we would want back. We are human, we've messed up, I've messed up. It's true, and we should be accountable for that. But fundamentally, the reason why half the communities in Hampshire County, it feels, was like what Westhampton, Southampton, South Hadley, and us, just off the top of my head, are dealing with this, and why many other communities are staring this down next year is because this is a systemic issue. The Mass Municipal Association, who's our trade organization, put out a report called The Perfect Storm. It's on their website. If you Google MMA, The Perfect Storm, you'll either get that or a really cool mixed martial arts thing, but I think you'll probably get the report if you scroll down for a minute. And it details exactly the ways that a lot of the suggestions people brought in today about how we can raise revenue as a city, we are statutorily prohibited from doing. Like, there's a lot of things that are tough, and it talks a lot about state government aid and the fact that it has not kept up with this obvious gap that is growing between what we are allowed to raise by the Commonwealth's own laws and the costs that each and every one of Massachusetts' 351 municipalities face. That leads us into a situation where whatever mistakes or brilliant decisions have been made over our last 30 years as a city, we are now in a situation where we need, as each and every one of us, to make a choice whether we want to pay more tax revenue for basically the same services, even actually like a little bit reduced services, or whether we want to receive substantially less services at a similar level of taxation to what we have been accustomed to. Neither one of those are good options. There's not an option here where anyone in this room is going to walk away feeling good about what that's going on. And another person could come at this from good faith and see it in a different place than I do, and that's fine. But my fundamental thing, what I really, really think is important here, is that I do believe that the citizens of Easthampton deserve a choice in this matter. They deserve a choice in which bad thing is going to happen. And that's why I think it's important that we do put this forward. And if people want to vote no on it, that's their choice, and we will honor that, and we will make the painful cuts that we need to. But I do think they deserve that choice. And that's why I really think it's important that we do this.
So we have a motion and a second. Does anyone have any last comments before I speak on this matter? Councillor Jamrog McQuaid.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I just want to acknowledge again how, and again, building off of Councillor Peake's comments, this is not a fun situation to be in at all. And we're all sharing the burden of our community. I think that that's also something that needs to be drilled home too. It's not us up here making decisions about the broader community. It's all of us that are needing to make these decisions together. You elected us to represent you. And I think we all take that responsibility very seriously. So I think moving forward, if this vote passes tonight and we put this on the ballot, I know I'm committing personally, and I know that I could probably safely speak for a lot of my other colleagues on this council, that we will be dedicating ourselves to work diligently to provide you with the information that you need to make an informed decision. And we will do our best to answer any questions you have moving forward.
Any other final comments from councilors before I say something? I'd like to, this is a particularly difficult conversation for me to have because last year I was the only no vote for our budget. I was the only person who advocated and said that it was a mistake to spend $4.5 million out of our reserves. I am so angry with myself that I was not more vocal, more so than I was. It pains me to no end to have to sit here today and look at these numbers, knowing what we were going through last year. I spoke, I spent a lot of time with our auditor, asking questions, trying to understand, came into the meeting and did the best that I could to advocate against what we were doing. And I failed. And it pains me because partly why it pains me is as a teenager, I will not forget my mother coming into my bedroom and telling me to be quiet, shh, and not having an understanding of what was going on. And to ask her, what is it? And for her to say to me, the electric company is here, shh. And I said, well, why is the electric company here? I didn't pay the electric bill. And so then we had our electric shut off. I will never, ever forget the sound of the electricity in our home being shut off. And to stand there in silence on a winter day, at the end of the day, with the sun going down and being in darkness. And my mother, who was a laborer, turned and said, oh well, and walked out. Because she didn't know what to do, because she had spent her entire life being beaten down by poverty. At the same time, come to find out, she owed thousands of dollars in back property tax because she wasn't able to pay her property tax. I had to call my grandmother. I had to ask my grandmother if my mother could now come and live with her. And I had to then do the embarrassing act of calling my brother's wife, my sister-in-law, because I couldn't ask my brother if I could come and live with them. And I know that there are people in this community who are not going to be able to afford this. It's just not going to happen. And I, in making this particular choice, and the voters get to decide, right? We're just saying, here's a vote, here's an option for you, we're behind, etc., and we need to cover these costs. And as has already been said, right, in reasons that are beyond our control. But I know that people are going to have to be forced to leave this community. People who have lived in this community their entire life. People who, as Councilor Smith stated, are at the end of coming into the twilight of their life and are going to have to make choices that force them to leave their community or force them to not pay certain bills or make really dramatic choices that to compromise their own well-being. And I don't, in full honesty, I don't know the right answer. And that's why this is so difficult, I think, for so many of us, because we don't know what the right answer is. We don't know the numbers. but I am committed. We're gonna get something for 6.9, and I'm gonna do everything that I possibly can to cut that even more. And I know that our department heads have been working tirelessly to get those numbers down. They've been working creatively to try to solve this particular issue for themselves. I understand that, and we're gonna do more. As Councilor Jamrock McQuaid said, we're going to find ways, work diligently to bring that number down even more. I've also had a conversation with Representative Gomez about trying to organize an Easthampton Advocacy Day where maybe some of those people who can afford extra cost, maybe we can take a busload of people to Beacon Hill and have a conversation about how our communities in Western Mass are being impacted by the lack of their diligence in making sure that we also have our needs met. And so that is my commitment. I've also made a point to tell Councilor Peak that he needs to meet more frequently with our auditor. Those are things that we can do. And so I think there's things that we're trying to do that we're taking responsibility for. But at the same time, this is painful. It is so painful.
Madam President.
Councilor Kuzinski.
You're absolutely right. There are no easy answers and there are no right decisions. That's why we're going to leave it to the public. You made a statement that you were the only one to vote no on the budget, and I just wanted to correct the record. I recall voting no on at least 3 sections of the budget and making amendments to reduce other sections, including the legal section. Didn't want it to go unnoted. We've tried to make cuts. We will make more cuts, and I agree with you. We'll make more this year.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Oh, actually, we don't need to do that. Oh, no, actually, it's on for the, abstain, motion passes.